Okay. Woohoo. Okay. So there's about a 10-second delay. Um, but now we have a stream. Okay. So there's about a 10-second delay. Um, but now we have a you all decide. I think maybe imagine sort of tables with chairs on the facing this way so people can put their stuff on the table and then face us. I don't know, maybe work table for you. I'll just leave that and then like 2-2 or something, 2-3 back. We got no idea how many people are gonna come here, so tomorrow is in the art gallery. Yeah, so this is today and tomorrow is let me just not do two things. Yes, so tomorrow's in not too far from here. Open in the tab. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Ja, gerne. Gerne, gerne. Ja, gut. Gut. Round right to the right. And then at some point, people, I'll run a different. Let's see. Sheets. Okay, now we're recording. This is all right. We are now. Okay.
Ist das auch ein Mac? Oder?
Das ist in Windows.
Windows, also
Ja.
die Ordner anzeigen.
Can you show the mappen, the folders, the folder structure in the index, wherever that is for you?
Oder
Um,
Presentation.
um, all right.
So the PowerPoint is not I don't know how to do it. So that's just photos. So
You might have to just use your old PowerPoint, the one from yesterday. Yeah. Let's try that one more time. Stick that in there one more time.
Moment.
Ich
will schauen, weil ich habe das eigentlich noch gemacht.
Einen Augenblick. Because I will also bring up immer abenteuerlich.
Ja, ist schön. Also die Ordner und hier Präsentation. Diesen Ordner.
Ja, das habe ich von vorgestern.
Da habe ich nochmal dran geändert, glaube ich.
Okay.
Und da bitte die PowerPoint.
Okay, PowerPoint, aber das kannst du mir einfach per E-Mail schicken.
Jetzt?
Jetzt,
okay.
ja, hier mit dem.
Okay.
Ja, dann haben wir das. Das ist 7 Megabyte, das geht.
Okay.
Also die PDF und wir können das einfach über die PDF. PowerPoint ist größer, entschuldige. Wie groß ist das? PowerPoint ist, das ist vielleicht zu groß. Nee, für mehr. Also versucht die auf einmal eins in Mail schicken und dann die zweite in Mail schicken.
Okay.
Das müsste klappen. All right. I'm going to go downstairs and check the door. Um, okay, so somebody's going to be taking care of Claire's text coming in, right? Just whoever, somebody do that. Okay.
Yeah.
And that'll come to mail to me. Und dann haben wir das.
Okay. Verbunden.
Berit, how did you all first start working together? I heard that you worked together for years.
Six.
Uh-huh. And so does this become part of the school curriculum, this public history work with the Jewish legacy? It should be. Yeah. That's exciting.
Ich glaube, das ist erst nochmal die PDF, ja?
Aha.
Nee. Ich schreibe jetzt nichts weiter dazu.
Nee, einfach so losschicken, ja. Es gibt jemand Abenteuer. So somebody send me the link to your slideshow. Is it one slideshow or is it multiple ones? Oh, okay. So can you put it in a wait, slideshows? I got it. Slides.
It should be.
In my email. But for some, yeah, send me the link directly in an email or in the WhatsApp, either one.
Okay.
For some reason, when I Google.
Ist jetzt schon auf dem Weg zu gehen.
Okay, sehr gut.
Und die anderen hinterher.
Aha.
Kann sein, dass die zu groß ist, vermute ich bei mir.
For some reason, I used to have the Google notifications turned on in Slack. And then I tried to undo that, and now they don't show up for me. And I haven't taken the time to unhack that. Okay, here's PDF. Jörg. Das ist gut, ja.
Die Größe der Datenanlage überschreitet die zusätzliche.
Ja, dann kannst du das einfach so im PDF.
Okay.
Das ist schneller und weniger. Okay. PowerPoint. Okay, so here's your all stuff. Awesome. Great. Okay, I'm gonna open one more thing. This is now we're happening. Now it's good. Jetzt können wir los.
Soll ich Ihnen trotzdem geben? Vielleicht geht das zu Hause. Du kannst das versuchen. Vielleicht
ja.
Also normalerweise.
Es müsste eigentlich klappen, ja. Und hat hier. Okay, ich gehe schnell runter, um zu sehen, wer da ist. So you guys can, whoever's going to drive, you can look here. You can see. I just have tabs at the top for the different windows. Here's your window on that tab. There's screen sharing right now, so it's live screen share, so everybody's seeing this and hearing this. And if you want, when you're presenting, we'll go like this, and then people will see your voice there, which will be nice. See your talking head, okay? Okay. Unless you sit in front of the camera on the time of group, which you can do, you can back this up and you can stand if you want at the podium, and then so I can imagine. this where you see. So. And then if you guys are. See, come here, Stuart, come over here, Braylon, and see. The light is not good behind, but see, you could put 2 or 3 who sit on the table or whatever. And then one person drive, maybe. Next to the window with no mask, that's gonna be okay. But mostly, we're talking to whoever's here, right? So,
That might be the worst table. There's no line of
Yeah,
sight.
that's
Thanks, you.
okay, good, I will come down, well. Here, okay. I'll be back.
What if we, but then I don't know if we'll be able to like clip it, like
Oh,
change it,
like.
but I feel like that would be better. It also might not be far enough.
So. We'll let some more people in, is that gonna, you all figured it out there?
Oh, we're trying, yeah. I feel like that would work, but we just. I also don't know if you're gonna be audible, Anders.
Yeah, I can talk about that, I guess.
I could connect. with you and see how it sounds. I'm wondering if you could put the laptop right there. I don't have to reach it. I think it has to be.
I can reach over.
We might have to getting one.
Hi. Anders is.
Wait, Anders,
Hello?
it's lagging, so it's gonna take a minute to get that.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. But if it's here, we can't see everyone. We can leave that table and push it back. Well, are we gonna have to go up to it?
Angle is better.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if the audio will be okay.
From over there.
Yeah,
could you-
how well
It
could you
was
hear me
tough.
from here?
I could hear you
Okay.
perfectly.
We
yeah.
could just pull our chairs back and
Fit back there.
We still don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Wait, is there a clicker or are we just drawing off the
We
clicker?
had to hit the arrow button.
I feel like we should just put it like over there, so it's on an angle, and then one of us can just like get up and wait,
Over where?
like right over there, like.
I think, yeah.
Put it on. Here, would that be really inconvenient to have to get over there? Is that gonna be inconvenient to have to get up and change the screen? I'll check again. Wait, Andrew, can you start talking now?
Hi, Flora, can you hear me?
It's like in the background. Yeah.
I guess you're.
Oh, you're like even louder than me.
Oh, boy. I'll tone it down then.
Well, I feel like that's ideal. Except for you. I stopped. Well, I think that. I don't like when you feel. Just if I'm very excited to hear about it, and I'll be watching it the moment I get my phone. Everyone is just very quiet.
Und ein Freund von ihm hat gestellt, kostenlos für uns. You are welcome here, Liam. And Thomas. Hi. This is Thomas Medicus. Students, introduce yourselves quickly. Me and I'm coming have some next to Rebecca.
Flora, your name?
Anders. Yes.
I'm Brayla.
Brayla. Nina.
Yeah, Nina, I know.
So come.
Yes. But it's not more people.
And more people, yeah.
Are they coming late?
I don't know, we'll see, near the start of the show in terms of the family. There should be, but they're late, Gideon is always late. Yeah, this is probably them right now. Thomas Medicus, everyone, is my friend who is a writer and a critic and a biographer and an autobiographer. And kindly agreed to listen and tell us what he thinks today. I will let you all.
Nina, he's having information about Ernst.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very important for you, I know.
We've met.
Yes, we were searching for information of Ernst. So I told my friend to go.
People. Introduce yourselves. Yeah, you all guys seem all well. How are you? Well, okay, now I gotta set this other camera. Turn it off.
We stayed in several places. I think.
It's looking at
Really like it, with a lot of stress. He was interested, exposed.
They're lying to you.
Eli Randall. We're all gonna be watching. Eli is an artist that is part of the project. Shannon, you know, Charlotte is our host today. Part of giving us today. Rebecca is a student of a college from a different college in the States. Really young, you know? So they downstairs.
Yeah, I think we'll be very hard to find.
Okay, look, I see.
Well, yeah, I guess you keep it on the way. Oh, yeah.
Now we can start.
Yeah.
So I can put them out. Our thing.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't know. Yes, next, oh, you can see.
Yeah. We're fine. Yeah, we are meant to be going to naturally.
Yeah, I know. And then the and then everything was wrong again. And then I only.
Yeah, I think we said. Yeah. I'll be my dad. Still, yeah. Something, yes, we're here to Thursday. Thanks.
It's not English.
We are going on like this.
Sorry, but it's, and it's Eduardo's fault. He made me late.
Yes.
Then I go to the market, this is how I give you. Very nice.
Now we're waiting for Bill first.
You have to think about it, you have in the very beginning. You don't have.
I have now the white here. You live in London? Well, this is hard to see, whatever that is.
That's just to get us started. Yeah.
My part of the family is here.
Oh, good. I'm coming down.
Somebody take with us. I told you let's do it. This is room right there. No, you love it. This-
You can get to step without. You got the very visual, but you didn't.
You couldn't be. I'm Laura. Nice to meet you officially.
Yeah, maybe you had much.
So there were 6 traveling and now there's 5.
What about 6? Yeah, but we have a lot to say from her.
So there's one person. What are you doing? What's the presentation?
I entered.
It's Milford.
Wild, huh?
Amazed that I got you
I know, you beat us.
and I left 10 minutes after.
Well, we got, hey, hi.
How did we go?
Good. Yeah, that's right. We haven't actually met. Yeah, I can do that, but hi. We got.
Yes.
I love Eli. Hester.
Wait. Miriam. I saw you on the. I represent.
My my grandmother, like, right, very, very, very sick.
You know, yeah. I think he's an older person, I don't know. From AP or something, or. And he always tells us, Linford, before that, his youth and.
It would be like that, but he's like 57. Yeah.
He doesn't hear very well.
So
that.
Definitely keeps getting bigger. Yeah. Right now, getting to know.
Wait a second. I think she knows.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna convene us. Okay, wait, stop. Stop, you all have all weekend. Gideon, you got a chair somewhere? Yeah. Okay, welcome, everyone. We're now officially begin the symposium of this archive project. First of all, I want Charlotte to stand up and be recognized as the host. So Charlotte,
Okay, sorry,
Gideon messed everything up. Just scooch the table over you. So Stiftung Neue Verantwortung, the Foundation for New Responsibility, really generously given us this space today. And so that's just wonderful. And Charlotte is a colleague of a friend of mine there, Wesley. Tell us in just what the Stiftung does.
So we're a think tank basically, and we work on the politics of the intersection with technology and science. So basically making policy recommendations for technology.
In the public interest. They're on the good team, right? So
Yeah, also like on the not very big corporations, but very independent.
Right. So thank you, and thank Thorsten, and thank the Stiftung. God.
No worries at all.
Okay, thanks. So then she's gonna actually go work on Saturday because she leaves on vacation tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm Scott Denham. I'm amazed to see this come together in this way. You know, what began as a kind of scholarly chore to read some old German Sütterlin script and translate for a colleague who was neighbor to Gideon. And then this project snowballed into this giant archival research project that now has come together with intersections of family, students learning to be archival historians, a topography of the archive in Germany, and all these new friends and connections. Let's see, really quickly, we'll do introductions, just your name and your affiliation, why you're here. Usually I say, who are you and why are you here?
I'm Anders.
Speak loudly for the record.
I'm Anders. I'm a student working on the archive because I thought it was an interesting project.
Good. Go.
Okay, I'm Grace. I'm another student working on the archive, and again, I just found it very interesting when Denham brought it up.
I'm Flora, I'm a Milford, so I'm here.
Yeah, so how, Flora, did you get here by way into the student project you will hear later? That's a fascinating and unbelievable story.
I'm Brayla. I was recruited, I think 2 years ago now to work on the Mendel archive, and I've been here ever since.
I'm Nina, and I was recruited in January to help specifically with the Milford archive.
Felix.
And there is, I'm school psychologist, I'm calling computer. went together with the educational process for students and teachers in the schools of Amsterdam. And
If
you
if
for
Arnstadt, you can't stay away, right?
Jetzt musst du übersetzen.
Okay,
Mein Name ist Jörg Herbst, ich komme aus Arnstadt. Ich erforsche seit 2007 die Geschichte der jüdischen Familien aus Arnstadt.
so Jörg is a historian, a public historian, and an activist from Arnstadt, and since 2007, he's been researching the legacy and history of Jewish families from Arnstadt, and has been internationally recognized for his public history and activism work. So this is a real privilege to have. It's a real privilege to have your, ich sag wie, dass für eine Ehre ist, dass du mit dabei bist.
Meine Ehre.
He says, no, it's my honor. Look at mine. Come on, it's gonna-
I'm Thomas, I used to be a journalist, then a scientist, and now I'm mostly a writer of biography. Concerning mostly the intersection between family memory and general history of national socialism. Yeah, that's it.
And Thomas and I have been friends for several years, and I have been to his place and space of this intersection of family and history in a village called Gunzenhausen. And 3 years ago, we spent several days there looking at all the spaces, so you all know how that is. Okay, next.
Kate Milford, and we're here because Miriam sent me an email saying Gideon Mendel is investigating the Mendel archive, and I said, oh, I'll bring the news on the archive.
You'll hear more about that.
And the Mendels and the Milfelders are connected.
We will see the biggest, Europe has made the world's biggest family tree. We'll see that. We all have people. Okay, Laura's sister, good.
I'm Amy, I'm Laura and Hester's mother, and I'm representing Matthew Milford, who has COVID, and is a Milford and
Yeah, but I just got a note from him. He's listening to the live stream.
I know.
Which is why when you're talking to the live stream, be upfront and speak loudly. So, Eduardo.
Yeah, I'm Eduardo Mendel. My family went with my grandfather through München, and from München, let's say, Arnstadt, München, Santiago de Chile. And a part of the family, Mendel is, I'm a physicist and so on.
Okay,
Yes, there are two family members in Mendel family in Chile. I'm Miriam Mendel. I'm a study librarian, and it's been very interested in making this archive for any health archive because it can be very important for later generations when it's there. And but also we have a lot of pictures, and when I'm gone, there are no children where everything goes. So therefore, I think it's very important to have these things, and that later on people can do research. Is it not auf Deutsch?
nee,
Es geht.
ja, ja. Ja, also es gibt noch ein Archiv bei Miriam und ihrem Bruder in Holland.
Ja.
Und wichtig ist, dass das auch seinen Platz hat nachher. Für nachher.
Vielleicht ist da auch Überlapp.
Oh ja, es gibt nur Überlapp. Das ist ganz sicher. Okay, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cole. I'm another student from the US who is unaffiliated with this project, but I'm doing Stolpersteiner research here this summer. And I'm also working on my own independent research project, so I've done a lot of work.
So Rebecca's interest in Stolpersteiner will overlap with much of what you see today. And she comes by way of a colleague in the States who is in email contact with me. So, yeah,
Sawani.
Sawani, yeah. Eli.
I'm Eli Mendel from one of the Mendels. I'm an artist and I work with my dad in the family archive project.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, we'll get there. We're going in circles. Yeah.
I've lost a bit of confusion.
Okay, you get to conclude. Nell, you're next.
I'm not, but I'm a Milford,
and Kate's sister. So, yeah.
Good to see you again, Shen.
Hi, I'm Shen. I'm still at Davidson. I'm not affiliated with the summer trip, but I've been, in the Melbourne Academy Channel.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Okay, Gideon, you get to go.
I'm Gideon Mendel, I'm the same Mendel, and I guess I'm partly responsible for kind of unleashing this monster.
Yeah, and wholly responsible.
And yeah, when I was kind of sorting out my, kind of moving my mother from the place into a smaller home a couple of years ago, I kind of came across a folder which said, well, there was one folder called Re-Alps Immigration and another folder called Unimportant Family Documents. Just looking at these documents was this kind of start of a process, and there was never any handover of this material, but I found a lot of things which were, I think, personally important and historically important, and it began this process of researching and kind of revealing, in a sense, what I call the word as an archipelago of archives, so that we have archives emerging in South Africa, in London, in Brooklyn, in America,
Netherlands.
in the Netherlands, and maybe in Chile as well. And so we have many different connected family archives, and we've just in the research, you've been doing the Milford archive. There's so many layers of interweaving between these different archives, and that's. And obviously, I'm the photographer and artist, and this archival work is not something I never thought of myself as an artist in a way that I sort of said kind of area going down. And I think realizing that kind of archival practice and working as a visual artist and photographer are actually much closer than I thought they were.
Great. So the main project this summer is my students and Flora, who is now my student, going to the spaces and places in the Mendel and Milford archive in Germany and in France and in Austria. And so they're going to tell that story and have some slides, and then Jörg is going to show some slides specifically about Arnstadt, which more and more we have learned is the real beginning of a lot of the Mendel and Ehrlich families. And so I want to give them a space. For the record, I need to say thank you to not only to the Stiftung Neue Verantwortung for providing our space for today, but to Davidson College, which has funded all this. And this, you can imagine, it's not cheap, but when you have 2 years of unspent travel funds because of COVID, that provided 10 weeks of full funding for these students. Beloit College, in Flora's case, also did the same. They're trying to like catch up with us. I guess they were happy to fund Flora's trip. And so here we go. We'll do mostly formal presentation this morning. Then there's a long lunch break of 3 hours for people. There's tons of food nearby, right close nearby, or you could get takeout and bring it back if you want. And then from 3 to 5, we have another just conversation spot. And my hope is that Thomas, my designated commentator, will by this afternoon have some insights for us that we haven't thought of yet, based on his work as a biographer of someone who studies the intersection of space and place and public history and family history. And he and I had an idea already when we met early yesterday, day before yesterday, of the kind of the next steps in this sort of project, what that might be in terms of books or exhibitions or studies or things like that. And then tomorrow, the artists, Flora as a creative writer, Gideon as a photographer, Ilya as a visual artist and an animator, and a friend of mine who is a dramaturg and a theater director will present creative work emerging from the archive
2 to 4 at the gallery, and we'll talk about where all that's all listed out and get there. That's going to be great. So go. You all are up. Come on up and talk loud. All right. Hello out there in the world. We're now gonna put this up. Are y'all ready? Okay. Don't trip on the cords. You gotta come up and stand in front of it. How are we gonna do that? Somebody be it, somebody drive the show.
Oh, I think we tested it and then others who talk about, they can hear, they can hear.
Okay.
So we started with the Offenbach archive. That was our first stop on this very long and crazy amazing trip. And we didn't really know anything about what going to an archive would really entail. And so in the first 2 minutes, I pick up one of the books about the bombings, because the main thing we were trying to find is the bombing of Frankfurter Straße 99, which was a very big Mendel Hofferstadt house. And I open it up, and on the first page, I see right where Frankfurter Straße is, and it showed where the bombing was. And so that was a very interesting first experience to just immediately walk in and get an answer. So.
Yeah, and I think it was our first experience with having this information kind of come out of the textbook. We had some very specific statistics. It was what time the bombs were dropped, what day, and how many bombs were dropped. So we had all this information kind of coming out of the book. But then at the same time, we could go outside. We went and visited the house. And rather than there being this huge gaping hole in the street, what we had just read, that there's a direct hit on the day we have up here, the 8th of January, there's a direct hit on the house. But rather than it being this gaping hole in the street, it's just completely rebuilt now. And so that was our kind of first experience with being in the actual place where it happened and seeing this new development. The Stolper Center there, but it's not what you'd expect. So you have the history on one side, and then on the other side we have what we're seeing today. So that's the first juxtaposition of being in the actual spaces.
We had a lot of questions also about how did we get this? How is it so detailed? Who documented all this? Because it was literally from the minute by minute of this is when it dropped, this is where it hit, and then this is when the bells started ringing, this is when the bells stopped ringing, this is how many tons of bombs that were dropped. And it was just very it was very intriguing, because we were who wrote this, who documented this for it? It was very interesting.
Yeah, and that's something we found a lot, that we didn't always have a ton of answers to those questions, but there's such a cohesive pile of documentation that was kind of just there, which was pretty amazing.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Why did you, maybe I didn't get something. Why did you pick Offenbach, or what was it related with some of the families?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So the house where my father was born, it's a house where his father went up and died in the First World War. It's a house where my grandmother was born. So yeah, it's a 2.5 year.
Okay, so this was after, and I was. Okay.
Yeah, this was actually this is what the house looks like now. It's a dentist office. And these were the Stolper Center right outside. So it's a lot of mainly Hofferstadt.
That was Stolperstein made, and how that came about.
Whoops, I don't know if we know that yet.
That is,
Yeah, next question.
yeah,
You also have these statistics about by location.
yeah. I have this. I have them.
We'll put all this in the pages. This will all be documented. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Not necessarily. This will all happen in September. So Offenbach, the place where Gideon's father is from.
Yeah.
And grandfather.
And there's a lot of mention also in the Milford archive of them visiting Offenbach. And there's pictures of it in there where we were oh, this is
an important place where there's like crossover.
I am.
I'll click back into this. One person.
That was also one of the first places we visited, so that was very striking to like get to Offenbach, walk there and be like, oh, this is the archive right in front of us.
It was right down the street.
Yeah.
Which was like, I was
There we go.
expecting for a little walk.
Yeah, it was a 5-minute walk and then we were there.
Okay,
Make it a little darker in here, or should
It's-
keep it like this? Right, the shade.
we can, yeah, I'll work on that a little bit. You all can keep going. You're gonna. Charlotte, wie machen wir die Rouladen? Also die, ja.
All right.
Charlotte.
The house at the earlier time.
Yes, there is. All right.
Okay, good.
So we left this blank intentionally for artistic reasons. When we went to the Mannheim City Archives, we did not find anything there that was super impactful, but the archivist who was there, first of all, he gave us a very good rundown. I know he's gonna see this later, hello, who gave us an amazing rundown of how Germany progressed from basically kind of shoveling the Holocaust behind to acknowledging their own role into it. And that only came later in about the 1970s. And it didn't really, I'd say, come across the entire country until the 1990s. So what he did was he recommended us to visit the Karlsruhe archives. These are the general archives in the entire state of Baden-Württemberg, I believe. So, and that was essentially the biggest archive discovery we've had this entire trip. That was a figurative gold mine, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So yeah, I think this shows, for me at least, finding these little leads and following them until basically we find the biggest discovery, one of the biggest discoveries of our entire archive journey. That was a lot of fun. And it was also very nice talking to people who have grown up, well, let's just say all the archivists we talked to are very excited about this. So it's really nice to talk to people who are also incredibly enthusiastic about it and are very excited to see that the younger generation is taking an interest in this. So yeah, talking to him was very, I don't know how to say it other than amazing. And he also gave us this excellent lead, which we'll get into a minute. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
Well, also just about Mannheim in general, I think just like going over why we were there. I mean, that's where my Opa was from and where he and Tony lived and Max for him the first 11 years of his life. So that was just a pretty important spot for the Milford part of the archive. So at least for me, just getting to be there and walk around and like walk where my grandfather walked was pretty amazing and pretty special. But I don't know, I just wanted to talk about its importance for a little. So, yeah.
Okay, so this is a photo from the Milford Archive from one of the many photo albums that were included, and it's a picture of each of the houses in Mannheim that they lived in, that they had a connection to. And so a big part of our like experience in Mannheim was seeking out these places and seeing what they are now. And I wish the photos were better or that it was darker in here. But there is like you can see Sophie and Alfred Eichenberg, which are the brother and sister of Tony Eichenberg, later Tony Milford. You can see them like standing on the balconies and stuff, but unfortunately that's a little hard to see right now.
We'll have high resolution photos for this in the web. We can link all these in high quality out from the website for later.
You know what they look like?
I don't think we have, yeah. And that's where they are today.
So they're in the same order as on the other page, and one of them is even like it's not there anymore. And we don't exactly know the story behind it yet. That's definitely something I want to look into on why that building isn't there anymore. But it was very interesting too. We're walking down the street, we're like, okay, it should be right here on the left. And then we look and we see a giant open space. And it was it was definitely confusing at first because we're like, oh, are we in the wrong place? No.
Nina, go back real quick.
And then forward, yeah.
And that was pretty striking. I don't know, just seeing these places that we've seen in photographs and seeing them now, and not that they're not important buildings to the area now, but it was just that like these were the homes and now it's empty space, or now it's a dress shop or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So then afterwards, on that same day, it was one of the many holidays in Germany. So there was nothing else we could do. So we were like, okay, this is a perfect day to go look at all the houses and find the Stolpersteine. And when we were there, like looking at the Stolpersteine right in front of this house, which wasn't even really an apartment, there was like a spot for like a parking garage to go in and then like the permanent above it. It was, at least for me, it was a very emotional experience because this was someone we have pictures of, we hear all about his family, we have his voice in his letters, and seeing like his final resting place, like this is the place where he can finally be at peace and memorialized. And it was very, like, we just like stood there for a while because we were just like, this is him. And it was, I don't know, for me, it was very emotional. I know probably for Flora was even more.
Do we want to read what Claire has to say? We're reading things for our friend Claire that can't be here today, but she has a lot to say.
Positive the other day, so Claire and Matt have told me. So while you pull that up, so Max Luther is the great grandfather of Flora, the grandfather of Matt and Kate and Nell, the father of Karl Hans, who becomes Ken, who becomes Kenny, who you'll hear about later, who is Flora's old house. And we have, like Grace was saying, we have a lot of his voice and a lot of his life in the archive. And he was recorded, you all were getting that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Hester, I'm sorry. Hester, great grandfather.
Okay, so Claire said when we visited Max Feathers Stolperstein.
Can you slow down and speak up?
Yes. So we visited Max Feathers Stolperstein. I still struggle to articulate how much emotion we all felt when we looked at his Stolperstein, because this was a really big moment for us. We've all spent so much time learning about Max, and it felt very personal to see his Stolperstein. To physically see in concrete the German nation take responsibility and hold themselves accountable for murdering Max Millfelder. Obviously, a stumbling stone will never compare to a single life lost, but being there to see it, I understood how impactful a stumbling stone can be.
And that's something I think, at least I know I felt every time we're walking around and we see the Stolperstein, like we always stop and look because those are people and those are lives that we want to remember. So yeah, definitely seeing Max's was very intense. But seeing that and having a personal connection kind of made me feel like there are people out there that, or many people have personal connections to a lot of these. So it's important to just like take the time to look at them whenever they're there.
And I think the fact that they're so small is also what kind of makes them so powerful, is because being in Germany also, we're pretty much constantly like walking over these tiny memorials. And we do kind of feel an obligation to look because like it is so tiny, but that's also all that's left of the person. So it seems like almost insignificant, but at the same time, there could also be nothing there.
Before we move on, I'd also like to say I appreciate the amount of work and research that went into finding the person's name, finding where they live, finding what happened to them, all into these small stones, and then they are permanently cemented into the ground. I think that takes a lot of dedication, and I just like to say that's very impactful.
Can I just add to
Yeah.
that? I know, that's why I was wondering about how the stones got in Offenbach, because this came about because I reached out
Yeah.
to them and asked them to do it. But I think that they also I think that many of them were generated by this artist.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But this one is there because we said, hey, would you put this there?
When was that?
Right after my father died, so, 2016.
2000.
And I think I got in touch with him right after he died.
Right. And you're is responsible for 150 Stolpersteine,
62.
162 Stolpersteine, and I'm not yours has been the energy behind making all those happen. We'll hear about that.
Ja.
Ganz kurz, sehr wichtig, die Stolpersteine finanzieren sich ausschließlich aus Spenden. Das ist auch,
Stolpersteine are only financed through donations.
genau. Also es gibt dort keine städtischen oder staatlichen Gelder dafür, ausschließlich keine
Let's
Spenden.
state the municipal fund. So personal initiatives like this,
Yeah.
we're talking about, that make them happen.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question, the ones outside 99 professor, we're nothing to do with that. I mean, we found them, I found them.
Right, so somebody,
Somebody, somebody.
someone like you found out.
They done it without knowing that we were. Wrong.
So Rebecca, you can maybe say a word about the different kinds of initiatives that bring about focus from the family, from the local schools, like Barrett works with. You know anything about that?
Yes, so, I work specifically with the Berlin Mesa area. And most of what we get are requests from family members, for people who are very close to the family. And so that is how a lot of Stolpersteine are initiated, also through, people doing their own archival work or groups like schools. But a lot of it is, living family members. And it actually takes a long time to complete, one single stone. A case for one family can take about 4 or 5 years, because there's so much, so many requests, and it takes so long to do the research for just one family. And so I was on one case, and it took me about a month and a half to complete and send off the inscription that would be on the stone. And usually it takes about 5 months, since it was only 2 people I was working on. It didn't take as long. And you also, you hit a lot of dead, and it can be very, very discouraging sometimes when you're working so hard to find what happened to these people. And it's not easy. But
Can I just say, I think it's interesting for the record. Just recently, Ina and I did a sort of residency at a museum upstairs, and we met someone called Daniel Key, who's a Jewish activist and journalist based in Hamburg, and he was very hostile to Stolpersteine. I mean, he kind of had a position that he thought, he was, that they were demeaning, that they were on the floor. I mean, it's, I don't agree with it, but he was, he kind of had a position on them that they were also that many of them were done without consultation with the families and were part of it. I mean, he had a whole very complicated opinion about the way memorialization is done by the victims of perpetrators. So he was, just for the record. Yeah, there's a big controversy about 10 years ago, but I think it's a very nice history. I wanted to ask you something. Behind these stones, let's say these stones, the shields, is there some, you said you have some, for each person, you have a whole, like, investigation? Can you find this somewhere, or is this, let's say, for everybody in Germany, or is there like some background?
yeah, so on the website, we post biographies for most of the stones. Sometimes they aren't posted because if the family doesn't want their biography online, accessible to everyone, then it's not. But for most of the stones, I know, in Berlin, I don't know about everywhere else, but I know that most of the ones in Berlin, you can find some kind of biography on.
Yeah, so that varies by municipality. Lichtenfels, which we'll get to, has a very solid webpage with a lot of archival material and family biographies.
And sometimes there's just the tiny Wikipedia entry with just one line. So it varies greatly, I think, based on how the initiative came about. Yeah. Yeah, okay, let's go. By the way, Matt Milford just said thank you to a text to me. He's listening and he's glad this is happening.
After our stint in Mannheim, or I guess their stint in Mannheim, we went to France to see some of the camps that Max Mühlfelder was interned in. This is finally where I show up, so I can finally offer some of my own thoughts on the archive. So the first place we went to was Drancy internment camp, which is just outside Paris. This is where Max Mühlfelder was interned. I think this was the second camp he was interned in. And honestly, when we first got there, I didn't even realize it was a concentration camp, because basically it just looked like a big apartment block. There were a few monuments set up, but other than that, you could barely even tell that such horrible things that occurred there. And honestly, I wasn't a big fan of that. I thought that was kind of strange to not dedicate the site more, I guess, to what happened.
I'll read what Claire wrote about this, because I think it's something we were all feeling, but she wrote, when we were trying to find Drancy, my phone kept telling us we were there. We were standing on the outskirts of a collection of apartments, so we kept walking and found the park, memorial, and museum. Personally, I thought the memorial was very poignant. The train tracks and train cars stopping in the middle of this park. The memorial managed to make me feel sorrow, but I also left feeling angry and inspired. The museum was good and explained Drancy internment camp very well. From the museum, we realized that those apartment buildings were part of the camp. I understand trying to be economical by repurposing old buildings for new purposes, but turning an internment camp back into apartments felt unbelievably distasteful. We ended up walking around the entire complex, and after learning about the violence and the trauma of Drancy, I felt like France hadn't fully acknowledged its past. They moved on too easily. I say this as someone who has traveled and seen many memorials and museums in the past 8 weeks. I felt disheartened leaving Drancy internment camp, and it wasn't just how easily the French repurposed the old barracks. Max Mühlfelder was interned and deported there, and so were 67,000 others. The violence and trauma that Drancy carries almost seems to be too much. But that is a feeling I have had felt frequently when confronting Nazi and collaborator violence. And this is something, so that was what Claire wrote, and that's something I definitely see how, what Andrews was saying, like when we first got there, we didn't know where we were, like we didn't think that was the memorial and we kept looking for it. And then walking around the apartment complex and seeing that people were still living there just felt, I don't know, like it just felt so strange. In my mind, I feel like I keep thinking that life should just like pause in all of these places that are important. And I guess that like doesn't really happen anywhere for many things, but it still just felt really strange to me to be walking in this area and see people living in the buildings that like interns were kept in. Like it was just very intense, and it felt like not enough had been done. And the museum was pretty awesome in talking about it, but the camp itself just felt like there wasn't enough there.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of encapsulated this like reoccurring question that we had across the summer. Given that pretty much all of Germany was like blood soaked during this historical period, about like when do you rebuild and build new life on top of the space, or when do you stop and preserve and memorialize the space, which I think is what Germany has been trying to do since World War II. And I think in this space, we were all just pretty much shocked to see these buildings like being reoccupied. And I think we later learned that people had moved into the spaces only like 3 or 4 years after the camp itself had closed. Yeah, so that was a significant moment for us.
I have a question for all of you. I wasn't there when they went here. I was visiting family in the Netherlands, but that memorial right there, how do you think that artistic style represents the camp? Do you think it's good? Do you think it does it fairly? The statue itself. How do you feel about
That's
that?
something I was so confused about. Like, I'm sure there's a significance to it, but seeing that, I just didn't really understand it, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we saw a very similar one when we went to Luxembourg, actually, right
Yeah.
outside of a synagogue. We saw it, and I don't, it's definitely a specific type of art style. Or like, it definitely carries a specific message, but I think that's something we've all been like, why this specifically? Because I don't know what it's trying to be. Just like off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think
Can you
that,
explain what this monument symbolizes? Can you really recognize it?
It looks
What does it mean?
Can you
Magnify the center part.
That's something we were, kind of struggling. Well, the next page, it has like an actual train car, and I thought that was something that held a lot more significance when we were looking at it, but in this one, just looking at it, I was honestly pretty confused. I mean, one of them has, I believe it was it Hebrew writing on it, or was it, yeah.
Are those abstracted shapes or are they actual forms that you can't even tell?
Oh,
Specifically,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be just sort of like controls, also confusing in person.
Yeah. But that's something we really struggled with, because the questions we were all asking are the questions we were asking, and we didn't quite have answers to them. Like, I think looking at them, I was really confused. And I felt like that is not how something should be memorialized if you can't really understand it when you just look at it.
Yeah, especially because the photo itself doesn't really capture the feeling of the area. Like, when we first got there, like, there's people moving in and out of the houses. There's like a kindergarten, like right next, like pretty much right across from this memorial. Like, the street is right here too, so it's noisy from the street. So like we didn't even see this when we first got there. Like, you kind of have to look around, and then it's definitely not as prominent as it was on this photo.
Sometimes they really make it confusing, the art, because it was confusing what happened to the people. And like the really this museum here in Berlin also, they explained certain things that it was getting the confusion to get the atmosphere. So it could be, you can see it because they're too far away from it. You cannot see, we can see it nearby. It is could be an idea behind it.
I think the idea of memorialization is fascinating, and I have a feeling we'll be talking about it, in the second session, but it could be nice, to sort of collectively see everything else and then talk about it.
Yeah.
That's about, I think the history of the monuments is very interesting and very important. So my question is, do you know when this monument has been placed there?
I'm not sure.
I bet you can have
I
it
think-
for the second session.
Yeah.
There's, as you all can imagine, a deep scholarly conversation
Absolutely.
about this sort of
Yeah.
memorialization. And we read a piece by James Young, who's a scholar who did the initial kind of work on this. But what's maybe just for them to move on, what's fascinating is to see that the memorial art is completely contextualized in other contemporary art movements. Because the people who do that are trained with their cohort, and then they get this big problem they have to solve as an artist. And so they map right onto artistic movements by decade, in ways that are, pretty predictable. So you have these huge big block sculptures that demand moving in and out of space as a viewer. You then have the Stolpersteine with the primacy of text in place. You have the big abstract memorial here in Berlin, the memorial of murder in Europe, which invites and rejects engagement. We can talk about that later, but there's, hundreds of these throughout. That one's, to me, echoes many of the big memorials at camps and death camps in the East, in Poland and Belarus and Ukraine. Big monumental stone things, partly too because monumental stone is something people could do at the time, that's cost less than bronze or steel or landscape architecture. You know, so all those things are interdependent. But I think this experience of disorientation, confusion, like you say, Miriam, is intentional. Yeah.
I have one, what is June 27th? And what is, where is the year?
It's, this is the, this is,
When they are there, they were there.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, you go ahead.
Okay.
So now to
Yeah.
like first the move
Year.
2022,
last
this,
month, 4 weeks ago.
You get credit.
yeah.
Oh.
Oh, don't worry, it has 2022 in the title.
Okay, you can go. Whoever.
Does Claire have anything written on this?
Yeah, so, Camp Brewers is a camp in, southern France, and this is where Max was first interned before he was, moved to Johnsey and then further deported to Auschwitz. So Claire, wrote kind of a long piece here that I'm gonna read for her. I felt a lot of emotions here, many conflicting and confusing, but I left feeling the same as I did at Johnsey, overwhelmed. While Johnsey moved on by repurposing the old buildings, Gores burned down the remnants of its past as a mass internment camp. I was surprised to feel overwhelmed by such nothingness. Besides the 20 or so plaques with information and a couple models of what the barrack would have been, it felt like we were meant to experience what was the nature that surrounds the camp. The plaque spent a lot of time on the Spanish freedom fighters that were also interned at Gores and on the Angel of Gores, a non-Jewish woman who helped the prisoners. I felt like France lacked a sense of responsibility for its actions as the right regime. I also want to talk about my experience at the cemetery in Gores. I know I wasn't the only one who felt this way, but I've spent a lot of time journaling and thinking about this moment in relation to the archive and to the trip itself. I have already established how surprisingly overwhelmed I felt at the camp, but I felt very differently inside the cemetery. Whether it was the beautiful weather, the quietness of our location, or the nature surrounding us, I felt safe in the cemetery, and that also made me feel very uncomfortable. As we sat in silence, I felt calm. I didn't want to feel calm or safe. I wanted Gores to invoke real negative emotions, especially after I walked by every single gravestone, all 1,072 of them. Feeling a sense of peace made me feel extremely guilty, and I know I was not the only one. It is more uncomfortable to feel comfortable or safe in a place that you shouldn't think than to just feel comfortable from the beginning. But that comfort forced me to really think about the 1,072 victims of Gores and the thousands more that were deported and murdered by Nazi Germany. And it allowed me to think about Max. As I said the names of people's gravestones, I wondered if Max knew them, if he ate with them or shared a barrack with them, maybe considered one of them a friend. I was thinking about how in the midst of such violence and terror, how could a cemetery full of murder victims be such a quiet, calm place? It didn't feel fair to anyone. I felt a lot of guilt in the cemetery because I knew that I shouldn't feel safe at an internment camp, but I'm grateful that I did. It made me think in a new way, forced me to confront my own guilt. After I reflected for a while, I decided to talk to someone, and I found Clara Solomon from Karlsruhe. Born 1848, died 1942. Our conversation was meaningful, whether or not she chose to listen. Saying her name out loud, thanking her, apologizing, and asking her questions felt extremely powerful. The rest of our conversation will stay between the two of us, but I'm so grateful I chose to speak to her. And I think there are a couple things we all experienced like Gores. The one she said was that pretty much everything had been burned down. And so that was something that was different than Johnsey. We had these two experiences of either it's completely repurposed into something or it's burned down, and neither of those really felt comfortable to us. And then also Claire and I were sitting together in the cemetery, and I think that's when we were really experiencing this paradox between like calm and violence, and it seemed like pretty unnatural that beauty should have been penetrating the space of death. And I think Gores was a very strange place just because we couldn't see anything that had happened there. There was really no remnants of the past. except for these beautiful like Pyrenees mountains that were there. And I think she described it very well. It was just like feeling guilty about how what we were experiencing was more like peaceful and tranquil than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I also like, I was, while walking through all the headstones, which we all did, I was looking at the places these people were from. And they were all from all over Germany, mostly Baden-Württemberg, but that was like a place we spent a lot of time, and I had traveled to a lot of the towns in that area. And I was thinking about like, I had so much fun at all these places, and I felt almost guilty because these are places these people never got to go back to. These are their hometowns where which will never be the same because they never got to continue their life there. And that was a very like striking, like conflicting feeling because I was having so much fun on the trip, and I felt guilty because these are places where they're never going to experience again. And it was very emotional and very moving being in that space because it was like a calmness, seeing the beautiful mountains, like they were taunting the internees at the camp that like, this is the beauty and this is the life that they're never going to be able to truly experience.
Yeah, for me, it made me kind of angry because it just kept, the question I kept thinking in my head was like, how could such beauty coexist with such great inhumanity? Because it's like, we were in one of the most beautiful places we'd ever been on the trip, and it was this place of death. And that just like, it didn't click in my head how that could happen. And it also upset me the way that the creators of the camp, or the creators of the memorial at the camp, talked about it, because a lot of what they focused on was life, and not the lives of the people in the camp, but the ways that living in the camp was good, and the ways that like people created art and like had spaces to do that in the camp. And I do think one of the most important things about this whole trip has been remembering life and remembering that people whose lives were stripped from them still led these amazing lives, that it's more than just the date they died, the date they were born, when they were married, stuff like that. But trying or having so much that was celebrating life at this camp just felt so wrong to me. Because I do think it's important to remember that people created life wherever they met, but I think even more important than that is that in this space, it was a space of death, a space that even though it wasn't a killing camp, like 1,072 people died there. Like it just, that was very intense, and it upset me that the people that created the monument like did that in a way where it was talking more about life than the atrocities that they had committed. Because I do think celebrate life, of course, but also don't forget. And it felt like celebrating life in place of owning up to their actions.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Flora said about life. I just remember walking around and looking at some of the plaques, and they had 2 or 3 that were dedicated to basically motherhood and birth within the camp. And all I could think about when I was reading those plaques were the multiple gravestones that were just for children, for newborn babies. I just thought that was like a horrible idea for a plaque to put up there. I really think they should have focused on, I guess, how horrible the camp was instead of trying to make it seem better than it actually was.
Just to clarify, question that the graveyard there is for people who died while they were at Ghosts.
Yeah,
Right.
It was
Yeah, so Laura's the first big deportations of Jewish people from Germany happened in the state of Baden-Württemberg in southwestern Germany, where my family. And this is October 1940. And so this stands that from the historian's point of view, this is the kind of the beginning of the end logistically. This was Adolf Eichmann's first big project. And all those Jews from Baden-Württemberg were deported to occupied France to Europe. So this is the pipeline, and stayed there between a year and a year and a half. And then were to move to Nancy, which was the central deportation spot to the east from France, from occupied France.
So the particular story of Max Mühlfelder and your particular emotional and engagement with that is from the historian's point of view of deeply representative case. You know, this is part of the machinations of the Holocaust are very visible in the move from Mannheim to Ruhr to Drancy to Auschwitz in between October 1940 and December 1942. And as you all have said, I think completely correctly, French memorial culture has pretty much failed so far. I don't know, Thomas might disagree. We'll see. You know it doesn't. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so Nina mentioned this before, but the Mannheim archivist suggested that we go to Karlsruhe and that we would find a lot of documents there. And when we arrived, I think Nina said it was a gold mine, which is pretty much the case. Karlsruhe is where we found the most amount of documents. They had stacks and stacks of documents waiting for us on the table, almost all of which were applicable to our archive, including many restitution documents, which is the main thing that we had gone there to find, restitution documents from Tony and Max to the German government. And I think what was especially powerful about being at Karlsruhe for me is that throughout the whole trip, we're going to simultaneously history museums all across Germany. We're learning about this kind of huge version of history, but then we go into these archives and we can experience history on like a micro level. And I found that being in the archive really kind of transitions these like uncomprehendable statistics into our own like tangible reality and makes this history like far more understandable and meaningful, rather than just giant statistics that are hard to understand. So yeah, this first document is a restitution document from Tony. This is the huge stack that I was working on. It was probably about like that big, and it was pretty much all documents back and forth from Tony, attempting to get money back for her boat ticket to escape Germany to the United States. And each time it's getting denied, each time there's something wrong with her document.
She had to get lawyers in order. She did finally get reimbursed, but she had to get lawyers.
What's the date on that letter?
1958.
1958. Okay.
Yeah.
It's already, does it say 50 days? Is that the evidence?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I actually went down a rabbit hole when it came to these restitution claims. This was extremely fascinating to me. I apologize, but I actually looked through the treaty between the state of state of Israel and Germany, and Jewish people living outside of the US who had escaped the Holocaust due to persecutions could already file for restitution in 1953. She started in 1956, I believe. We're not sure why. But yes, it was actually a very long, it was not easy. It was a very long struggle to get reimbursement for just the ship tickets. For schooling, Ken had to go to work when he was pursuing his master's. He tried to get reimbursement to help with his education because he worked a lot and they would not give it to him. I don't think he ever did receive it from what I'm recalling. So for me, this was, I didn't go to the camps, so I didn't feel what they were feeling, but this was especially enraging to me because when Tony first came here, she lost her entire livelihood. She was very skilled. She was a very skilled worker. So she had a lot of experience, and she had to live off her brother because she didn't know English. And so when her brother died, she was essentially on her own for several years. And it was just very tough to read through. It's very infuriating for me.
I had no idea they would write directly for like reimburse me for this and this. Like I knew that there was a.
I didn't know this.
That's. Wow.
So we will put we'll put all these documents, we'll make all these documents big.
I tried to read as many as possible, but there were so, I cannot stress how much there was. There was like this much total.
you have to pay because you have to leave your entire life behind.
Yeah.
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 Great.
This is just the rejection letter from, I believe, the government saying the German government saying there was some technicalities with Ken's story about what they would pay for and whatnot, so they ended up denying him at first. And then, take it away, Grace.
Yeah, so my stack was mostly Max Muehlfelder, like, what was in his house, like, an itemized list of everything that was in his house, down to, he had this watch. He had this clock, he had he had 2 armchairs and like 20 spoons, like, it was very itemized down to like everything, which is what this is, which obviously is a little hard to see, but you guys can read it later. It was very detailed and very precise. And then also in that, it was like letters from friends or neighbors saying he did live in this house. This is where he lived. I went here. This is what I saw in there. This is where he worked until he like was deported. Like, it was all very detailed, and it was everyone just vouching and being like, yes, this is true. Everything they're saying is true, which it became clear, which is why it was so enraging, because it was clear that without all these like people saying, witnesses saying, yes, he did live here, they wouldn't have approved anything. Like, it was definitely a very long and tedious process that I'm sure a lot of people would have like given up on, because they're like, this is, 1, it costs money for lawyers, and 2, it's just so much work after your relative, her ex-husband, just died. Like, she just found out like he wasn't coming back. And so I feel like it was definitely a very long and strenuous process.
Yeah. I think what really got to me was that he essentially killed his father and then would not essentially even help him the slightest in return. And they had to be forced, which, yeah.
And this is in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So the archive in Karlsruhe is what you came across, and that's like, and those materials were there because Tony asked.
So
people
that's the
back-
state, that's
The big state
big
archive,
state
yeah.
archive of the state of Baden-Württemberg.
But they had materials around Mott's,
They
Uh-huh.
because Tony was writing to ask for them.
for restitution for his.
Yeah.
They also had Ken's birth certificate, which was very interesting.
What's the thing?
His birth certificate.
They also had stuff on Sophie Eichenberg,
Sophie Eichenberg,
which is,
Tom's sister.
yeah, she was very interesting to me personally because there's not a ton on her. And I believe after looking through the archive that she actually managed to stay in Mannheim. She never left, which is very interesting. I did know she married a Christian man, so she probably went into hiding, I assume, but yeah, we just don't know a ton about her. She's very interesting. Mhm.
That's your great.
Great. And so Tony to was.
Given
So she had 2 children.
she died in 1959.
So 59, so she never lived in.
No, no. And that's, I'm assuming it's just like, we just don't know anything about her, which makes,
There was an uncle of my mother's, Holly, who was married, in fact, to a Greek woman that lived in, so he lived in Berlin through the war as well, and survived.
did he go into hiding, I assume?
I don't know, I mean, I think the history, is that, there were a lot of Jewish men who were married to German women who weren't in the end deported, and it's partly to do with the big protest. There was a protest that they began to try and arrest him as one of the few protests.
Yeah, we have that experience is in this archive.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was shot, the Simon Mofeller was the friend. I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
He was married to a Christian
Right.
woman in Berlin, and their child was Klaus, Charles, who lived there, so throughout the war.
Yeah, this archive has everything, every historical example that we teach is in this archive. Every single one. So, yeah.
Okay, so this document is from the Red Cross and stuff, and it was just very, what's it called? And I included it just because it has the exact date that he was like brought to Boers, and then has the exact date from Drogse to when he was like deported from Drogse to Auschwitz and everything. So this was like like by the day, and I'm sure if we contacted Drogse, we could get a list of the people who were on that convoy over like that deportation.
Right, or Arlson method. So Rebecca, this is the kind of document that your teams work with in order to get the text correct and the background correct, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
because we have to find everything we can on the people, not just what would go on the stone. In the inscription, we have to find everything possible, so we see a lot of stuff.
Right.
And it's the Red Cross, that's what we.
The Red Cross, yeah, somebody needs to write a book about the role of the Red Cross between 1942 and 1948, because they're completely complicit in many ways.
And that was terrible with, I always get, I say, the goosebumps when I think about the Red Cross and they went to the Parisian stadt and they didn't see anything, and then went, they just didn't say anything. So when Red Cross for me is,
And that after the war, the Red Cross had a very important information service.
Yeah.
So you could address to the Red Cross and you could get important information on the relatives.
Yeah, we have a letter,
It's a different role after the.
right?
They should have changed their name at least.
Yeah, we have a letter from the Red Cross about Max from 1946, answering an inquiry from Ken, who had not heard, and so does not.
And so I've got a Red Cross kind of telegram, my father's last communication from his mother. Which is, and that seems to be some kind of communication organized by the Red Cross.
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of that from 1946 and 47.
well, this was before the 42.
Okay.
Sorry, this is like the last one from Cosgrove, but this was again in my documents. It was just about it has the exact date that they believe he died on. Because originally the date we had was just the end of the war. They were just like, they just presumed him dead. But it says here that it was August 31st, 1942. So only 21 days after he was deported from Drogse.
Okay,
So-
31st August. 42.
And that's a date that we never had as a family, so finding that was really huge.
Yeah.
So they're saying that's the day he was murdered.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say that. It says according to the documents of inheritance from the notary at Mannheim of 1961, Max Mulfelder's death date of 31st August serves as so this doesn't say that's the day he died. It says that for the purposes of inheritance law, we're using this date. So that's not quite true yet.
That's 1942 is the date they used on the show.
Yeah, 42 is correct, but we don't, so that just says, this is what the notary in Mannheim said serves as a death date.
Because sometimes there are records specifically around still, right?
Yeah, Auschwitz does, we have a lot of that, and also through the Arlson archive, but this is a great next step. So if we decide, you all, that this is something to pursue the exact date, this is one step closer. Because the question is, now, for the historian, is how did the notary public in Mannheim know that date? Where did that information come from? And it could well have come from the Red Cross through the International Tracing Service at Arlson. So we can see. So, yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, this is a photo of us in the Lichtenfels archive. We were in Lichtenfels for more of the Mendel side of the family, so this is where the Bruels were residing for many generations. They were merchants in Lichtenfels, so they had family directly in the city, but also surrounding Lichtenfels. So when we were in this archive, so we met an archivist named Frau Rittenbauer. I hope she was able to stream in today because we had a very, very incredible experience with her. She was so eager to talk to us. She was so excited to have young people in the archive. She kept saying how poor her English was, but she talked to us for like probably 2 hours in perfect English, explaining everything that she had found for us about the rules. And she was asking us so many questions, things that she couldn't find out. After Sophie Bruhl's husband had passed away, Sophie went to Offenbach and she said, well, why would she have taken her children to Offenbach? Why would she make that move? And she said, you must find out. And I told her, well, we've already been to the Offenbach archives, like we didn't find anything. And she said, you have to go back, you have to ask them again, I have to know, like, please tell me what you find out. And yeah, she, like I said, she's just so eager to talk to us, which was pretty amazing. And she also got very emotional telling us about witnessing her own reunion of other people, Tille, Stolperstein, and Lichtenfels. And finally at the end, she asked us, she said, oh, but none of you guys are family, like, why are you interested in this at all? As if she hadn't just spent like many hours of her life helping us who are complete strangers, helping us find any information that she could. And how she described it, I really, really enjoyed. She said, my archivist work is just searching, and then sometimes finding. And she said, those moments of finding are just, she never had words for them. She kept saying, I don't have words to witness these experiences. And I think that's better than I've been able to convey it this entire trip, is just being able to witness these kind of continual moments of, especially being with Laura, of having her find her family and seeing these connections grow and being able to get pieces of this family back together. It's just been really incredible.
One
And
more,
I've had correspondence with Albert Bauer at the archive. There's more grant money for students to go back next summer. So these connections will continue. Because there's a lot of work to be done at Lichtenfels, I think, yeah, and Augsburg.
one more thing about that archive is I feel like that was where it really solidified in my brain why archival work is so important. And I mean, that's what we've been doing all summer, but hearing Frau Wittenbauer talk, it just was so clear that people like her and Jörg who do this work do it because it's important to them and they just like want to remember and not repeat, or they just want to keep this history alive and give people life that maybe it was taken from. And it was so amazing. Like, it's been so amazing meeting archivists and becoming them, because it's just like, that's why archivists do this, because they love it and because they find it important and they just think it's something that should be done. And just meeting her and getting to talk to her was absolutely amazing.
We also did this in the synagogue at Lichtenfels, so.
The synagogue is the archival reuse.
No, they didn't have a big enough space, so she took us into the synagogue.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
the Bruhl house was also right across the street from where the synagogue was.
I mean, did you tell her that you've been looking at the Brill archive in South Africa? Did you tell her about the existence of the material?
We told her that we have a massive.
And she told us she wanted to know all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super interested.
Content, das ist nicht weit weg von uns. Im Blau. Du siehst in Deutschland auch, das ist der Ding im Blau.
Yeah, so this is, yeah. So Lichtenfels, Gideon, tell why Lichtenfels being briefly by way of groups. The trips, story, event, etc.
And my father lost his real father, Hermann Mendel, in the First World War.
Hermann, who was a brother of Flora
Flora,
Smith, and that eight sibling, the many siblings.
So that's one of the main connections with the family. So my grandfather's sister and his
Great grandmother.
yeah. So yeah, but we do all the some of the connections. But my father was having a difficult time as a child because his mother, I think he had mental health problems and was very disturbed by the death of her husband. So he was sent to live with a family of relatives, a family called the Doctor family. And so he grew up, spent half his childhood living with quite distant, well, not living with relatives. And Fritzburg was Helene's, that was the mother of the Doctor family, Helene's brother. So he would have been Helene Burl originally. So he was I think a kind of, I suppose, a foster uncle, but he was also a father figure, a very important father figure for my father. Because my father didn't have a father. Clearly, my father went to South Africa because Fritz Burl went, so Fritz Burl immigrated in 1933. I had an immense amount of correspondence. Fritz Burl was an avid correspondent.
That's the understatement of the movie. There's thousands of letters and postcards, you know, from literally thousands.
I'll show I'll talk about that tomorrow. He was a soldier who won the Iron Cross in the First World War. We had his journals in the First World War, and we also have the journals from his father who fought in the Franco-Prussian War. So we have just, and we have also the original documents going back to his Wilfrill in 1743 getting the freedom, getting from the Bishop of Lichtenfeld receiving the freedom to travel. What's the name of the document? We have the original found there. So so far we've made about 6,000 scans. And there's many more we made. I have strangely.
So you're a business. I need to see this.
So I got obsessively involved in trying to bring this material to life.
Wir kommen nachher zu einem Punkt, Arnstadt, Ledermann, Brüll, mit denen Sie auch verwandt sind, die Trägerwirken.
So he'll get to a point where the Bros are connected to the Ledermanns through Arnstadt. There's another connection.
So there are many obvious different connections, but the Brill home was Lichtenfeld,
Right.
And that also, I think, his mother had some ownership of the house in Frankfurt Strasse. Yeah, and I think that we should investigate because I think there's also matters about restitution for that house being shared with Brits.
Right.
So that the families were very kind of woven.
We'll have to do our next conference in because the artifact of this.
The Brits died young in 1958, and then he left many boxes of documents which seemed to be undisturbed until just so from 1958 to 70 years, these documents have been sitting in South Africa, and we just busy kind of invested. So I in touch with his granddaughter, the network, and she's been very helpful and supportive of part of the project. And my nephew is a photographer and artist in Johannesburg, and his assistant, one of his studio assistants, has been scanning the archive. So she's been working one morning a week for last year and scanning.
Just remind me, so your father stayed with the doctor family.
Yes.
And Brill is
Brill, Prince Brill, the doctor's mother was Brill,
Okay.
Principal was his uncle.
Okay.
Was the doctor uncle. Yeah.
Dr. Grohl, there.
Yeah, Dr. Mary. And my father, in my family, it was always the relation. So the doctors, the two doctor sons, Hanson Paul, also went to South Africa. And in my family, it was a complex, long history relationship with the doctor family. And, not always easy, you certainly can grow up, the doctors were always the wealthy relatives who were trying to keep up with. We were slightly different. Yes, and now in London, the doctors are very conservative and wealthy and very, very pro-Israel and pro-Zionist and they, it's a long story, but they had we've had some disagreements, but also some kind of connections with them.
London, there is Mendel, so all the marriage.
Yes, so there's another connection recently because the doctor, so quite different sides, and my mother at my mother's house, the doctor daughter met a Mendel son, so there's another level of Dr. Mendel kind of connection of generations.
Great. Okay, and then listen as Einstein.
What's on
Okay, so now you all, this is 10 days ago.
Yeah, so
From Lichtenfels to Amsterdam.
this is our final stop on our trip, before coming to Berlin. So we had another, very amazing visit here, thanks to your, for showing us around Arnstadt. We all kind of, piled into his car as he was driving us around. He took us to this Jewish cemetery. And the first thing that I remember is just being in the car and asking for like, oh, do you know, Eduardo, do you know another person? He kind of lists off people that he knew like all around the world, that he was in connection with, and he's like, oh, they're all your family. And this was a very special day just because I just remember Flora repeating all day, like I just had no idea how big my family was. I didn't know how big my family was. And that was extremely special. And I think kind of the moment I realized that the archive has encapsulated like so much violence and trauma and history from the past 60 years, but it's also just been like a lifeline between generations, and it's connected people that never would have met before, like Gideon, you and I, and Flora, like they're all families here. And so just hearing her say I had no idea how big my family was it was a really special day for all of us. Hearing Flora say, like, oh, my family is so small. And it was just like, it was such like a heartwarming moment, like that like gave us I don't know. It made it feel so personal to do this, like watching your family grow each day, like brought like maybe like so emotional because you're like, you have all these new people. It's so exciting. Also, having your we were telling you about this symposium, and you were like, oh, you can invite 300 people, and that's true. Like, there's so many. And then later that night, I got an email from Steve Goldschmidt, one of my relatives from Buenos Aires. So it was just like all of these connections coming together and being like, wait, there's another person that I didn't even really know existed until like that day, until a few months prior, and suddenly like it was family, and now so many of us are in this room, and that's pretty crazy to me. Yeah.
And that's the how.
Yes.
And these are all the Stolperstein for the Mendels.
Which are the names, which are on?
Adolf Mendel, Bertha Mendel, Alfred Mendel, Max Mendel, and Julius Mendel.
So some of the Stolpersteine say supported and murdered, and some of the Stolpersteine say immigrated.
Julius is my grandfather. I still met her, and I think until I was about 10 years old or something. I still remember things and everything.
His autobiography is very powerful.
Yes,
One of my favorite pieces of writing now. You don't do this, yeah.
Julius, we will hear Julius's voice tomorrow in the flag.
Say this documentary.
Yes, Alfred Mendel,
What?
born January 1906, fled 1936
It's just strange.
to Palestine.
Maybe it's a dialogue.
You can look at it right now. Okay.
Not after the father.
Alfred Mendel.
Yeah, he died in Iceland.
Yeah, there's another one. Okay. Yeah. Born 1906, yeah. So
Well,
I think it's a different because he was born 1913. So
maybe it's.
York says he's got all the details.
Yes, Jörg took us on this amazing tour throughout the entirety of Arnstadt, so he's the real expert here. Yeah, thank you for that.
Alfred, sorry, if I remember, Alfred Mendel was the father of Gertrud, I think, who was an aunt of a real aunt of my father. And Alfred, his family, together with the family back, they gave the affidavit. They went to Chile a little earlier.
Yeah.
Then they went a little earlier than my grandparents, and they could get the affidavit so that they would escape to Chile.
That's correct. And Gertrude was known by the Mühlfelder kids and Tony's family as Gertrud. They called her Gertrud instead of Gertrude. And there's a photo of Gertrud and a big car, a 1950s car in Chile. Smiling, they've arrived and they have this big car. And there's a whole page, a photo album page of Gertrude from Arnstadt.
How would she, I'm sorry, how is she related to you? That is your. No.
Gertrud is married, but she was, before she got married, born Mendel. So she was a real cousin of my father, and her father was Alfred.
who immigrated to Palestine.
Yes, and not the father.
Oh, no, he's a Chile.
Or at least maybe there's another Alfred that I don't know.
I know.
But then, like let's say they, together with the family back, which are also somehow related with the family Weinstein, they help my grandparents. Not my father, because my father, he went with 13 years, he went first to Italy for 1 year, to Florence, and then to England. He stayed all the war in England. And then he joined, after the war, he joined his grandparents and his brother, France, in Chile. But this family really saved the life of, this is a big honor to say it, I think, they saved the life of my grandparents. They wouldn't have been able to get out of Germany.
I believe this is the end.
This is just a little collection of our family that we've made on this trip.
This is also a time when people have questions or comments. We just thought we'd put a little collage up.
Yeah, I think maybe we take a stretch visit and then you get to give your Arnstadt history. And is that okay? Take 5 minutes, the bathroom's around the corner, we got no coffee, I'm afraid, but that's the way it is. And then we'll have maybe another half hour or so, and then we can have a big long lunch break and people can peel off and then reconvene here later.
I want to say thank you. I feel like,
Yeah.
We use the archive to get at the big issue. You said the story of a very big extended family, but to get at some very big important issues, including memorialization, how tragic events are memorialized, restitution, that was not an issue I had thought about, but how
how do you defend someone for the murder of a father or a grandfather or the loss of a home and a livelihood? And then just issues about how we tell our history. So I know that you've been encountering Flora, you know, as a defendant, but she feels so connected and thankful to all of you. And I know just Matt was in the thank you.
And just sort of trying to understand what's your family. Is it big? Is it small?
It's pretty big.
I'm excited for you all to see the world's biggest family tree, that's this is first slide. Yeah, so stand up and stretch, and I'll get yours, thank you all. Students, I'll get yours. Show up here.
Let me see. Matt, are you there? Send us a text. I'm gonna yeah, Matt.
Or maybe for the afternoon.
No, you can, let me see. I will go here.
Maybe we can figure it out for the second.
No, we can do it if I can just remember. Matt, try, put that in, see if you can join that.
Is he hearing it?
He should be hearing me. He said that he was watching, yeah.
Okay.
So see if you can do that, Matt. There's the camera, you all can. And let me, and might be, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. And Matt, yeah. Pardon me? All the email, all 260 people. Yeah, and I tweeted it out. We can see who's watching. I'm not sure. Matt, if you're listening, let's see, you can just come in. But we can also see. What do I need to do? I need to go here.
Is it streaming from?
It's true. Yeah, we're live right now.
We live, okay, can we go
Yeah,
ahead?
on the. Let me see. So we should be. So this is the live YouTube stream. We'll see if it's working. One watching now. Matt was on earlier there. So there's about a 10-second delay.
Right.
So we're up.
And how many people watching? You can see?
It says one, but I don't know if that's accurate because of the delay.
Right.
But this Zoom is being recorded and there's also a separate recording. So we'll should have it.
Okay. I want us to get started.
Jörg, so here's where you're gonna be.
Can you send Bruno a link?
Do
you have it?
Yeah, I'll send it to you and
Yeah, okay, yeah.
in
WhatsApp, please.
so so there's the link in your WhatsApp.
Okay, cool. All right.
So that you can send around. So Jörg, here's your and here's, we'll just go for, whoops, forward,
Okay,
backward,
okay.
and that's all.
Okay.
And then this is what the people will see is this and this.
Okay. Ist das für dich in Ordnung? Ich möchte diesen einen Zeitungsartikel von 1879, den möchte ich gerne zum Besten geben. Ich habe ihn mit
Ich habe das hier von dir per Mail
WhatsApp.
in WhatsApp.
Ja. Ich habe den. Wenn du möchtest, kannst du ihn ja gleich
kann-
vorlesen auf
ja.
Englisch. Dann muss ich ihn nicht erst auf Deutsch
Gut.
vorlesen. Weil ich finde
Ich
ihn,
habe das schon gesehen irgendwo.
ich finde den wahnsinnig wichtig, weil der etwas aussagt, was möglich war. Und nur wenige Jahrzehnte später passiert dann das.
Okay, so ich kann damit beginnen,
Ich
einfach
ich
frei
sag-
übersetzen.
Genau, du übersetzt dann frei, wenn ich dorthin komme. Ich habe das ja drauf. Da ist er.
Okay,
Ja, das sage ich dir dann.
also wenn
Wenn
du
wir dort
sagst,
sind,
dann
genau.
kann ich das vorlesen.
Genau.
Okay, oh, back. Come. Thank you. And you have to be careful of all these cords. We don't knock anything
Ich gebe
over.
mir Mühe, dass ich das nicht rausziehe.
So wie Nina das gemacht hat. All right. we'll wait for Nina. Thomas?
Ja, geht's dir mit,
Mir geht's gut. Gesundheitlich bin ich wieder da.
Ja,
Das ist
ja.
Gott sei Dank.
hast du mit dem Bauch noch Probleme?
Ja, die habe ich schon noch. Das wird auch bleiben, aber es geht mir bedeutend besser. Ich hatte ja eine Vorgesjahr noch mal.
Aber es war nicht Richtung Krebs, oder?
Nee, das war nicht. Magenoperation, also
Ja, aber du warst
Vorgesjahr und
Übergewicht, also du bist immer noch ein bisschen.
richtig, aber es ist bedeutend besser.
Okay.
Aber ich bin froh, dass das.
Das
ist schade, dass
die große Ding.
Das ist schade, dass das zu klein ist.
Und hast du eigentlich schon die Enkelkinder?
Nein, die brauche ich ja von euch. Die
Ja, aber ja, die müssen da rein. Jetzt wird hier in einem Buch auch da rein.
Das müssten wir nicht senden, damit ich die eintrage.
Ja.
Weil das ist ja noch länger.
Let's see, we'll fix the million get back. So we'll try to do, he will talk for a chunk, I will translate for a chunk, he'll talk for a chunk, I'll translate for a chunk. See how it goes.
Wow, bin ich aufgeregt.
Gosh, I'm excited.
Have you seen the actual thing? Like it's a paper, but from here until here, if you take it off, you cannot put it, you have to put it on the floor somewhere because there are no tables for that.
Look. And it's,
Oh, okay.
anyway,
Aber den kann
Okay.
den kann ich auch gerne noch.
Your caps, I'm pleased to introduce you and welcome you to this project from this side now. Freut mich sehr, dich so einzuführen in dieses Archivprojekt jetzt auch aus Familienseite mit neuen Familienmitgliedern und dann auch mit meinen Studierenden. So I'm really happy to welcome you to this. And just amazed at the serendipitous intersection of knowledge and connection and new relationships. So, danke.
Nee, ich habe zu danken. Ich will dir nochmal widersprechen von Beginn an, weil uns beiden ist es eine ganz tolle Ehre, hier zu sein. Insofern, danke.
So he says, no, it's my honor and for me and for his colleague and friend Barrett, who does curriculum work in the school in the area where they are. So,
Ja. Was ich sagen möchte, seit 2007 recherchiere ich die Geschichte der jüdischen Familien aus Arnstadt.
so 2007, he's been doing this work on the Jewish families of Ashtat.
Und gerade die Familien Ehrlich, Mendel, Rosenbaum, Katzenstein,
So these families, Mendel, Ehrlich, Katzenstein,
und Appel.
and Apple, the Apple families.
Ja. Hat ganz viel Zeit gebraucht, ganz viel, ganz kleine Arbeit. Und nun innerhalb von 2 Wochen treffen wir uns. Innerhalb einer Woche stehe ich hier vor Ihnen. Das ist
Wow.
So he says 7 years of peevish, tiny, particular, detailed work. And in 2 weeks, all of this connection with the students, and then a week later, here he is in this group, and that's amazing. Overwhelming.
Ich möchte gerne mit einem Zitat beginnen, was mich sehr antreibt.
Just beginning with the quotation.
Noch zumal, ich bin Deutscher, ich komme aus diesem Land,
German, coming from this place, from this country,
was diese Geschichte ihren Familien angetan hat.
that in this history, you see what has been done to your family.
Elie Wiesel hat gesagt, den Toten und den Lebenden schulden wir das Erinnern.
As Elie Wiesel says, we are obligated to remember for the sake of the living and the dead. This quotation.
Das ist mir ganz doll wichtig, das treibt mich an. Nun möchte ich Sie gerne mitnehmen, ich behaupte, zu dem Punkt, wo Ihre aller Familie Geschichte begann.
So I'm starting to take you on this trip from where your family history began.
Ich habe ganz zu Beginn angefangen, kleine Familienstammbäume zusammenzustellen, Dinge, die ich gefunden habe.
So he began by putting together little family trees, little chunks of family trees that he found in Amsterdam.
Und einer ihrer Verwandten aus New York, aus der Rosenbaum-Familienlinien, wir kommen dann drauf, war zur Stolpersteinverlegung in Arnstedt.
So the Rosenbaums from New York came to do a Stolperstein placement in Arnstadt.
Und ich habe ihm versprochen, ich schiebe jetzt endlich alle Familienstammbäume zusammen.
So in that moment, he said, I'm going to make the big family tree.
Und dann ist dann das passiert, diese 2 Meter, 3 Meter sind es.
9 feet wide.
Ja, diese 2 Meter, 3 Meter Familienstammbaum ist dann plötzlich dann erschienen. Insofern möchte ich Ihnen sagen, Floras Gedanke, ich habe immer gedacht, ich habe eine small family. No.
Yeah, so the echo of this idea, it's not tiny little families, it's all connected and it's huge.
In diesem Familienstammbaum sind 297 Menschen.
279 human beings are on this stage.
Und wir haben, Eduard und ich, wir haben gerade gesprochen, ich habe ja die Enkel nicht und die Nachfahren, die kenne ich ja noch nicht.
All of the grandchildren's generations.
Also es wird noch viel größer.
You know, we'll have a good version, high resolution version of this, we'll send every, but this is the generation of Gideon and over here is the generation of Kate and Matt and Nell. And Flora's generation is down here. And we know a lot of that you don't have yet.
Arnstadt, der Ried 7.
Reed is the name of the street there.
Place.
The place, the square.
Marketplace.
The square. Yeah.
Genau. Eine Tochter von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, Charlotte Ehrlich, heiratete nach Plaue Abraham Mendel.
So Charlotte Ehrlich married Abraham Mendel. In wann?
1800, weiß ich jetzt nicht genau. Steht in meinem Computer. Ja.
And that is Charlotte und Abraham.
Das ist Charlotte und Abraham, genau. Also noch einen Verwandten, den Sie wahrscheinlich nicht kennen, Donald Strauß, ist der Sohn von Irmgard Mendel, verheiratete Strauß. Ich glaube, Donald lebt.
Donald Strauss is the son of Irmgard.
Ja, genau. Das ist die Familie Strauß, genau. Also Irmgard. Ja, genau. Also Irmgard hat Hermann Strauß geheiratet. Genau, New Jersey, richtig, genau, New Jersey. Genau, und das ist ein Freund von mir, ist Donald Strauß. Und von Donald Strauß und von der Tochter Loval, Ellen, ist jetzt Loval, kann sein, irgendwie.
So he's talking
Ist dies,
about this photo of Charlotte Ehrlich and Abraham Mendel from the descendants of Irmgard.
Irmgard ist die Schwester von Abraham.
Nein, 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 nein.
Granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
And so this Charlotte is known as,
Oh.
is known to Tony as Grandma Mendel. She shows up as Oma Mendel. Yeah. So there, now we get to Gleicher Wiesen.
In Gleicherwiesen geboren und in Bergach zuletzt gearbeitet, Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, der Vater von Charlotte Mendel.
So this is Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, who is Charlotte Ehrlich's dad. And Charlotte marries the man. Abraham.
Genau. Seine Frau, Caroline Romberg.
His wife Carolina, born Romberg.
Hermann Aaron Ehrlich war Komponist,
He was a composer,
Lehrer,
a teacher,
Zeitungsherausgeber
a newspaper publisher.
und war, als er Rentner geworden ist, Abraham Mendel und seine Frau sind von Plaue nach Arnstadt gezogen.
So when he retired, they all went to Arnstadt.
Und Hermann Aaron Ehrlich und seine Frau sind dann zu ihrer Familie auf den Ried 7 gezogen.
So they, in their retirement, went to the Ried 7 house with Charlotte's family in their old age.
Dies sind zwei Beispiele von einer Zeitung, die Hermann Aaron Ehrlich herausgegeben hat, liturgische Zeitung.
So
Also
that's a theological newspaper that he edited and published.
für Chormusik hauptsächlich, jüdische Chormusik.
So for Jewish choir music.
Und das ist eine Unterschrift von also 1835 und das ist seine
And that's
Unterschrift mit einem
we have an
Siegel.
example of his signature from this 1835 document.
Welches Gebet ist das? Kann man sehen?
Das sind gar keine Gebete, das sind Chorwerke, das ist Musik, das sind
So
Kompositionen.
these are not, these are
Nee, weil
Non-sacred.
liturgisch kann sein, dass da irgendwie.
Das weiß ich nicht, das weiß ich nicht, das weiß ich nicht. Das hat auf jeden Fall liturgische Chormusik für damals gerade modern werdende
yeah.
Chöre.
So related to this, at this time in Germany, public choirs, community choirs start to happen. And the most famous example is from Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, who brings Bach out of the church and into the performance hall. And this is happening everywhere in Germany. And if there's a Jewish publisher of non-religious choir music happening, that's really interesting for musicologists
Yes,
also,
yeah.
to see, even at the tiny towns,
Yeah.
this idea of taking music out of the church and into the public sphere.
Im vergangenen Jahr wurde unser thüringischer Ministerpräsident Bodo Ramelow, er hat den Vorsitz des Bundesrates übernommen, hier in Berlin. Und es wurden, glaube ich, 3 Chorwerke von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich bei seiner, wie nennt man das, Einweihung, bei seiner
when
Ennennung.
Bodo Ramelow, who's the governor of the
Thüringen.
state,
Thüringen.
Thüringen, became the chair of basically the Senate, the state Senate representative group in Berlin called the Bundesrat. And at his inauguration, they did 3 musical pieces from Hermann Aaron Ehrlich. And these music, es existiert noch diese Musik.
Ja.
So we'll find out.
Ja. Es ist, ich sage gleich, mein großer Traum ist, ich möchte gern, dass die Nachfahren, dass Sie alle, auch die ich kenne, die Sie nicht kennen, dass alle Nachfahren nach Arnstadt kommen, Arnstadt besuchen und wir gemeinsam ein Konzert.
So his big dream is that all of the relatives come to Arnstadt and there's gonna be a giant concert, a choir concert to start off
Mit
the
ihm.
symposium.
Ja.
And there.
Get to work, Flora. Get to work. Yeah, that's true.
Oben links eine Visitenkarte von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich.
So a business card upper left.
Unten drunter, also H.A. Ehrlich, Lehrer.
So it says H.A. Ehrlich, teacher,
Genau. Und Arnstadt 1873.
1873.
Als dann
Where's the card from?
oh, eine ganz verrückte Geschichte.
This is a crazy story. It's
Aus nach der Stolpersteinverlegung für Familie Rosenbaum. Magst du übersetzen? Oder? Okay, also nach der Stolpersteinverlegung für Familie Rosenbaum saß ich mit dem Dr. David Jonas aus New York zusammen und der schenkte mir ein Foto der jüdischen Gemeinde aus Arnstadt vom Purimbein 1927.
When the Rosenbaum Stolperstein was being laid, wer aus New York?
Dr. David Jonas.
So David Jonas from New York showed him a photograph und
ich sagte zu ihm, ich möchte gern nach dem Essen mit ihm zum Grabstein von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich nach Plaue.
so he wanted them to show him the grave of Hermann Aaron Ehrlich in Plaue, which is wie weit ist von Plaue nach Arnstadt?
10 Minuten.
10 minutes away in the car
Ja.
to go see the grave, the gravestone.
Weniger vielleicht sogar.
Ja.
Nein, keine 20. Da bin ich in Erfurt bei 20 Minuten. Nein. Und David Jonas sagt zu mir, woher weißt du, dass das der Grabstein von Hermann Aaron
So
Ehrlich ist?
Jonas asked, how do you know that this is the grave of Hermann Aaron Ehrlich?
Und ich habe ihm erzählt, dass mir eine Frau aus Amerika die Abschrift aus dem Leo Baeck Institut des Tagebuches von Hermann Aaron
he
Ehrlich.
says that a person in the States sent him the transcription that she had of the gravestone from the Leo Baeck Institute archive in New York.
Und auf dieser Abschrift von diesem Tagebuch stand hinten, das sind ja keine Bilder, waren nur eine Maschinenabschrift,
So this is just a transcription, no photos.
war diese Zeichnung
So this sketch was there.
seines Grabsteins. Also Hermann Aaron Ehrlich hat seinen Grabstein selbst entworfen. Aber auf dieser,
So Ehrlich designed his own gravestone, and so in this diary, which is transcribed, was his sketch, the design for his own gravestone.
und ich sage zu David Jonas, laut Leo Baeck Institut ist das Tagebuch leider verschwunden.
But he said, according to the Leo Baeck Institute, they say that the original diary is lost.
Nein,
Nope.
das ist bei mir.
He says, nope, I've got that.
Eines Tages sendete er mir ein ganzes Paket mit Notenbüchern, Zeitungen, Fotos, Dokumenten
So
und auch dieser Visitenkarte von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich.
papers, everything came in a big package, including the business card.
And so are we descendants?
You are descendants by way of Charlotte Ehrlich, Aaron's son who marries the Abraham Mendel. So
Und die
4
beiden,
generations back.
sind quasi ihre
So Charlotte Ehrlich, daughter of Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, and Abraham Mendel have the 8 Mendel kids.
Okay. So the Miltons and us, the Mendels and the Miltons.
You are direct descendants of this person, yes.
Ja. Ganz wichtig ist, auf dem Grabstein von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich ist die Hand zu sehen, wenn Sie
And on the gravestone, you see the hand.
diese Hand mit einem aufgeschlagenen Notenbuch. Man sieht die
With
Notenzeilen.
a music text in front of it. So as to signify as a cantor, dass Kantor war.
Ja.
So the sign on the grave that he was a cantor as well as the composer of music, popular music.
Und wenige Zeit nachdem er nach Arnstadt gekommen war, gab er auch den Arnstädter Stadtplan heraus.
And so he also published the first map of Arnstadt.
Auch Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, Lehrer.
And he always names himself here, even on the city map, Hermann Aaron Ehrlich, teacher, is his self-identification.
Und jetzt du bitte.
Yeah, okay, so this is
Ich will ganz kurz erklären, dieser Zeitungsausschnitt, den jetzt Gott für Sie lesen wird, genau, bedeutet mir sehr, sehr viel, weil dieser Zeitungsausschnitt 1880 etwas beschreibt, was zwischen Juden und Christen möglich war.
right. So this is an interesting, in some ways, exceptional example in the public press of the general newspaper of Jewry, which was a local Jewish paper from 1880 that describes an important interaction between Jews and Christians in the 19th century. And so this is before
full legal status of Jews. It doesn't happen until 1883 nationwide in Germany. So it says, Bonn, 15th of February, from Erfurt, we hear from our correspondent, the Jews in Arnstadt have their cemetery in Plaue, in the forest in Thüringen, in Thuringia, where no longer are there any Jews living. And this is where their cemetery is. It's very beautiful, beautifully situated at the top of a tall mountain in the Thuringian forest, right at the foot of a ruin of a romantic ruin of a giant fortress. In Arnstadt, the retired teacher, Nathan Ehrlich, died. And now, with the body, with the corpse, there are only 5 or 6 Jews who are able to come to Plaue, to the graveyard. And the school children of the town, Plaue, gathered round and waited all in rows. Christian pallbearers carried the casket, took the casket took it into them, and more than 200 women and men turned and made their way up the steep path towards the cemetery with deep and, I must admit, joyful emotion. I gave the funeral oration at the grave of this man, this honored man. From the peak of the mountain, we saw the beauty of God's wide world, and more than ever, the certainty came to me during this funeral that we have arrived at a time in which realizing God and the love of humankind, the realization of God and the love of humankind will cover the earth like water covers in the ocean. Water covers the ocean. So that shows up in the newspaper. Well, 1880.
Ja, und wenige Jahrzehnte später bricht dann die Hölle los, ja.
And then only a few decades later, all hell breaks loose.
In the First World War, the Jews fought for Germany and so on.
Yeah, we have Max Mutfelder's Iron Cross in the archive.
No, my both grandparents from both sides, Mendel and Horwitz, they were saved. They were in concentration camps shortly, in 48, and then they got out again because both of them had this stupid iron crosses.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, weiter? Also mich rührt dieser Artikel immer noch sehr an, weil das beschreibt etwas. Ich halte auch Vorträge vor Schülern und mache Stadtführungen. Und dieser Artikel, den setze ich, weil das gibt nochmal einen Kontrapunkt.
Describing how he uses this often, this piece, when talking to school groups as a kind of grounding point for coexistence. Yeah. Okay.
Sehr schön. Ja, Ihre Familie, natürlich nicht alle, weil ich sie bis heute nicht
Of course,
kannte.
not everybody, but here you are, your family.
Ja. Es ist leider nicht gut zu sehen. Das ist Donald Strauss.
Donald Strauss.
Den Herrn kennen wir.
Yeah.
Du warst bei der Stolpersteinbelegung in Arnstadt.
So this is the Stolperstein laying in Arnstadt.
Ja, bitte?
Wann war das?
2015.
So this was 2015,
Irmgard Mendel, ja, mein Hermann, hier ist Irmgard im Freibad in Arnstadt. Und dieser kleine Mann ist Donald Strauss.
Irmgard and Donald Strauss.
In Arnstadt wurden auch Autos produziert, die Firma Ley.
So there was a car factory in Arnstadt.
Und die Familie Mendel soll eins der ersten Autos in Arnstadt.
The Mendels are one of the first people to own a car in Arnstadt.
Hier auch Irmgard Mendel bei den beiden Frauen, weiß ich nicht.
Vielleicht
Vielleicht können Sie mir helfen, herauszufinden, wer das alles ist.
And then the question, maybe you can help me figure out who all these people are. Yeah.
Bitte?
We'll make a digital.
Habe ich im Sharp.
Sieht so aus, als meine Oma, das ist ja so. Nee,
Wer?
Alice.
Was? Ich kann dir die Fotos schicken, dann schaust du dir mal an.
Mhm.
Also zu meiner großen Freude war Eduardo in Arnstadt bei der Stolpersteinverlegung und hier im Gespräch mit Schülerinnen des Arnstädter Gymnasiums.
Yeah, so he's so happy that Eduardo was able to come and talk with high school kids at the laying of the Stolpersteine.
I have to say, Jörg not only does this, but he has done a lot, you know, in Arnstadt and the area to talk to children in schools and so on. Schools, children, they help him with cleaning the cemetery and this and that. He also got a very important medal in Germany.
Yeah.
For being a friend of, you know, closing up Jews with Germans.
Yeah.
Jo.
Wo arbeiten wir es?
Ja, auch. Natürlich auch. Ich denke, richtig. Also mir ist es wichtig, mir ist es ganz wichtig, dass die Leute verstehen, also nicht nur die Jugendlichen, sondern auch die Erwachsenen verstehen, weil ich komme aus der DDR, ich bin in der DDR sozialisiert, wir haben uns vorhin kurz darüber unterhalten.
So it's really important for him to, and the word Jörg is coming back to, is for people to understand, especially young people to understand, which is especially problematic because of this being East Germany, this being the GDR, which has a different historical perspective.
Die DDR hat immer gesagt, wenn man behauptet, sie seien ein antifaschistischer Staat, das waren sie nicht.
The DDR always claimed to be an anti-fascist state, and Jörg says that was not the case. And in this context, a lot of Jewish history was effaced in East Germany.
Genau. Von der jüdischen Geschichte in Arnstadt war fast nichts bekannt.
Nothing known before he started.
Es gab ein kleines Buch, so groß, von einem Superintendenten, so heißt das, gell? Von einem Superintendent, also ein Superintendent einer evangelischen Kirche, ist also ein etwas höherer Pfarrer. Und der hat ein kleines Buch über die Juden in Arnstadt geschrieben.
So
Das,
a Protestant functionary in the church did a little tiny history of Jews in Arnstadt, which was incomplete. Das war nicht vollständig.
nein, gar nicht. Als ich mich 2007 im Januar bereit erklärt habe, ich übernehme das Projekt der Stolpersteine, dachte ich, in dem Buch steht alles drin.
Yeah, so he
Nein,
said when I agreed to take on the Stolperstein project in January 2007, I thought this little booklet would give me all the information I needed.
nein.
Ein neues Buch.
Ja, das muss es geben.
Now
Das
we're to write a
muss
new
es geben.
process.
That would be nice.
Das muss es geben.
So this is marriage registers.
So, jetzt brauche ich eigentlich das, was da unten drunter steht. Kommt ihr da hin? Geht das?
Oh, yeah, I think of the
Okay. Das sind jetzt zwei Beispiele, wie Ihre Familien zusammengehören.
examples of how your families belong together.
Das sind Seiten aus dem sogenannten Hochzeitsregister.
So
Also
this is the marriage registry in the Arnstädter Stadtbibliothek or
Stadtarchiv, Stadtarchive ein Teil
Right.
und zum Teil im Standesamt. Also es gibt ja zwei Teile.
So there's two offices in Arnstadt that have these kinds of records.
Dies ist die Ehe von Leopold Katzenstein mit Fanny Mendel.
Fanny Mendel and Leopold Katzenstein.
Das ist die Eheschließung. Leopold Katzenstein, das Grab haben wir gesehen, wo diese große Marmorecke rausgeschlagen war.
Where there's a big in marble piece of the grave of the Katzenstein grave.
Ja, das war Leopold Katzenstein. Das ist die Eheschließung, und das ist ganz bezeichnend.
Max Rosenbaum ist Mitte der 1880er Jahre, ist er allein, also ich habe ihn auf einer Passagierliste gefunden. Er ist allein im Alter von 14 Jahren von Armstead nach Amerika.
So this is Max Rosenbaum, who alone at the age of 14 immigrates to the US in the 1880s. And he becomes the sponsor of Alfred.
Und er kommt zurück 1880
He comes back to Germany in 1880,
und heiratet seine Hulda Mendel.
marries Hulda Mendel,
Und nur wenige Tage später, ich glaube 3, 4 Tage später, reisen sie nach New York wieder aus.
and then 4 days later they go back to New York.
Hier steht auch irgendwo, dass er in New York wohnt.
Yeah, and so he's in New
Hier,
York.
genau. Wohnhaft,
New York.
in New York.
Und Max Rosenbaum hat die Immigration von Alfred Eichenberg, Bruder von Toni, er hat dafür gebürgt. So
Ja.
he offered up the
Das glaube ich.
financial security that Alfred Eichenberg could immigrate to the States. That's this Max.
Und jetzt kommt ihr's.
And here, now we come to you all.
Adolf Eichenberg
Adolf Eichenberg,
heiratet Flora Mendel.
Flora Mendel.
Ich habe hier bei Adolf Eichenberg.
Wolfgang.
Also in der, oder heißt das hier Wolf?
Das ist Wolf. No.
Entschuldigung.
Yeah,
Wolf.
incorrect.
Wolf,
It's Wolfgang.
Wolf, nicht Adolf.
Wolfgang.
Wolfgang, genau. Heiratet, also
Flora.
Flora. Hier habe ich beide Seiten Ihnen gezeigt, weil wichtig ist, jetzt kommt noch eine andere Verwandtschaft mit ins Spiel, nämlich als Trauzeuge unterschreibt
So the witness to the marriage,
Max Ledermann.
Max Ledermann,
Max Ledermann war ab 1900 der Vorsitzende bis zum Schluss, der Vorsitzende der jüdischen Gemeinde.
he was the chair of the Jewish community there, who serves as a witness for this marriage.
Also ab 1900 bis zum Ende und war verheiratet mit Minna Brüll.
And was married to Minna Brühl.
Das, was ich vorhin meinte. Genau. Genau.
And we have in the Milford archive, we have Wolfgang Eichenberg's papers.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Ich möchte die Archive gerne sehen.
We got that.
Also wir haben hier die Unterschrift nochmal. Also Wolfgang unterschreibt auch nicht als Wolfgang, sondern nur als Wolf.
Wolf.
Eichenberg und Flora Eichenberg geborene Mendel.
So that's his signature. He always only signed his name Wolf and not Wolfgang, like the original Wolf.
Genau. Und der weitere Trauzeuge neben Max Ledermann ist dann Moses Dornberg.
Dornberg
Das
is
ist
another witness, and we know Dornberg because let me see here. Wolfgang Eichenberg was originally supposed to marry a Dornberg,
Okay.
but he fell in love with Flora. And the Dornbergs and the Eichenbergs, Mendels always disliked that.
Wow.
And we'll
Okay.
learn about that tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
That's Ulrika's Tagebuch.
Es gab in Thüringen, jetzt bricht die Hölle los, oder da ist sie schon losgebrochen. Im Jahr 1942 gab es 2 große Deportationen aus Thüringen. Viele,
Two big deportations in 42 in Thuringia.
es gab auch einige kleine, aber die beiden großen hat Thüringen, also das sind die großen Deportationen
So there
gewesen.
were others, but these are the two main deportations.
Vom 10. Mai 1942 in das Ghetto Belzice, nicht zu verwechseln mit dem Vernichtungslager Belzec. Das ist
Right,
etwas
so
anderes.
the ghetto Belzia is different from Belzec, which is an error people often make.
Which area is very
Polen.
significant?
Polen.
Polen.
Polen. Und gleich obendran zwei ihrer Verwandten, nämlich Ida Bremer, geborene Mendel.
Ida Mendel.
Sie war mit Max Bremer aus Seesen verheiratet.
Married Max Bremer, so that's Frieda Mendel.
Ja. Lydia Ehrlich
Lydia Ehrlich
gehört zu der Ehrlich-Linie.
was on the Ehrlich side of the family.
Und bei der Deportation nach Theresienstadt sind ebenfalls verwandte Familien dabei. Zum einen der Herr Appel.
Mr. Herr Appel is there.
Das ist so
He's
universal.
related.
Und Bertha.
And Bertha.
Bertha Ehrlich.
Bertha Ehrlich is Tante Bertha for Hans, for Ken. When his mom is on business trips, he goes to Artstadt and stays with Tante Bertha. Also der Hans, der Ken Milford, hat in den Ferien bei Tante Bertha gewohnt in Artstadt, als die Mutter auf Geschäftsreise war.
Es waren viele Kinder da.
Yeah, lots
doch.
of kids.
Ja. Stefan, falls du online bist, ein lieber Gruß an dich nach Buenos Aires. Ich sage, falls Stefan gerade online ist,
Ja, so Stefan
Goldschmidt. Stefan Goldschmidt ist ein Ururenkel von Bertha.
Stefan Goldschmidt, who lives in Buenos Aires and corresponded with Flora day before yesterday,
Bitte?
is a great grandson of Bertha.
Wie war er ehrlich?
Lieber ehrlich, ich hoffe immer.
Ehrlich also means, to be honest, no, that was a joke.
So he's making a pun about the name Ehrlich, which also means honorable.
No, but warum war er ehrlich? Wie wird er verwandt mit ehrlich?
Wir kommen gleich. Wir kommen gleich dorthin. Also das sind die beiden Deportationen, die auch ihre Vorfahren mit betroffen haben. Das rechte ist aus dem Staatsarchiv in Prag.
This is from the Art City Archive in Prague, because die Rätinstadt is near Prague.
Ja. Und das linke ist aus dem Staatsarchiv in Weimar.
And that's from the Weimar City Archive.
Steht ja auch mein Großvater da drauf.
And her grandfather is there.
Der ist, helfen Sie mir?
Mein Großvater.
Sagen Sie mir den Namen bitte.
Mendel.
Max Mendel?
Max Mendel.
Ist der nach Theresienstadt gekommen?
Ja, und dann ganz gut nachher.
Aber also nicht aus Arnstadt nach Theresienstadt gekommen.
Was soll er gesagt?
Das finde ich raus. Das kann ich nachschauen. Wenn ich zu Hause bin, schaue ich das nach.
So she said, how does Max not be on here? Well, because he was deported from Halle.
Yeah.
And not from Arnstadt. So he
That's-
would be on a different list.
Das ist die Deportationsliste der Arnstädter. Die Arnstädter beginnen hier
So that's the Arnstadt.
und enden hier.
But Theresienstadt has good records. We can find that, yeah.
Yeah, I have even pictures for.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
deportation was to Theresienstadt.
When they came to class.
Ich kann das gerne suchen für Sie.
Yeah.
But
So
I didn't know that they had this way.
they had lists from each area. It depends, but often they were by town, listed by town, alphabetical, or town by date.
Date.
Yeah.
Jeder Deportationszug, das tut weh davon zu erzählen,
He says it's painful to talk about this.
jeder Deportationszug hatte eine spezielle Bezeichnung.
So each train, deportation train, had a special.
Theresienstadt war die Bezeichnung römisch 16, also ein X,
So
ein
they had
V.
a number, they had a administrative number, and so this was
Yeah.
Roman numeral 16,
Schrägstrich 1
number 1.
und dann kommt ein Bindestrich und dann kommen die Nummern. Also hier
Then a hyphen, and then these running
hier
numbers.
zum Beispiel Bertha Ehrlich 524.
So in the perpetrator documentation, there's a very clear structure of listing the deportations.
Der Familien zwei Großenbaum hatte ich vorhin schon, das wären das nur Beispiele. Der Familien zwei Großenbaum, das übrigens nur um die Ecke ist
This is
vom
just
Ried
around the
7.
corner, the Rosenbaums who are connected at the Ehrlich level. And Leo.
Leo Ehrlich, seine Frau Hermine und Siegfried Eugen sind nach Auschwitz deportiert worden. Das ist ein Scan einer Auschwitz-Deportationsliste.
So an Auschwitz deportation list for these three people.
Und was diese Sorgfalt beschreibt, wie die Deutschen kontrollieren. Es wird einmal kontrolliert, es wird nochmal kontrolliert, es wird nochmal kontrolliert, es wird nochmal kontrolliert. Dann schreibt man auch hin, dass sie seine Frau ist. Also das sind die beiden. Und es wird nochmal kontrolliert und hier wird Mann und Frau angegeben, es wird nochmal kontrolliert und es wird nochmal kontrolliert, ob die auch ja alle im Zug sind.
So Jörg is pointing out the discipline with which the Germans check the deportation lists, right? There's 7 different affirmations of who was on the train by different bureaucrats along the way.
Hermine, Leo und Siegfried Eugen werden in Auschwitz ermordet. Sie sind aber nicht nachweisbar als Häftlinge in Auschwitz. Was vermutlich bedeutet, dass sie bereits auf der Rampe selektiert wurden. Weil Menschen, die in das Lager hineingekommen sind, sind dann also als Häftlinge irgendwo notiert worden.
So they are listed only as having arrived, which implies that they were selected immediately to be murdered in the gas chamber because they don't show up in workers' lists. So there's a whole history of the details of Auschwitz, which is an exception in many ways to others. Steve Goldschmidt just writes to me and says, incredible, I'm seeing and hearing all this for the first time. So this is from Buenos Aires. So.
Joachim überlebt. Joachim Rosenbaum
survives.
Wurde in Brüssel wohl versteckt von irgendjemandem.
Was hidden in Brussels.
Aber nur wenige Tage nach Kriegsende stirbt er bei einem Autounfall.
And only a few days after the end of the war, he's killed in a car accident.
Das ist sein,
and that's his,
man kann gar nicht sagen, sein Führerschein. Ja, genau. Familie Ehrlich.
The Ehrlich stones.
Das sind alle Stolpersteine für Familie Ehrlich. Alle Kinder, aber jetzt nur ein Beispiel, sonst geht das, glaube ich, zu weit. Also oben die Mutter Bertha.
Bertha at the top.
Genau. Die Regel der Stolpersteine sagen, dass die Menschen zwischen 1933 und 1945 gewesen sein müssen. Da Max Ehrlich bereits 1919, glaube ich, verstorben ist, wir werden es dann gleich sehen, kann er also keinen Stolperstein bekommen.
Yeah, so Stolpersteine are only for people who died or were deported or murdered between 33 and 45. So family members who passed away earlier, even if persecuted, are not able to be listed in Stolpersteine.
Wenngleich wir in Arnstadt damit begonnen haben, und das macht Sinn, Gunter Dämmlich, der das Projekt geschaffen hat, die Stolpersteine, hat am Anfang den Gedanken, dass nur Stolpersteine verlegt werden für die ermordeten Juden.
So Gunter Dämmlich, the artist who conceived this project, thought from the beginning it would only be for people who were murdered.
Ein guter Freund von mir aus New York, dessen Großeltern Robert Cohen, ich weiß gar nicht, noch nicht, Robert Cohen, dessen Mutter, also sein Großvater wurde in Buchenwald ermordet, seine Großmutter im Ghetto Bergis.
So by way of a friend, Robert Cohen, whose grandparents were persecuted and murdered.
Und dessen Mutter hat überlebt.
But his mother survived.
Und Robert hat mich gebeten, Jörg, ich möchte, und das macht Sinn für mich, ich möchte, dass meine Familie im Gedenken wenigstens wieder vereint sind. Also nicht nur die Ermordeten, sondern auch die geflohen oder fliehen konnten und überleben konnten.
And so his friend Roberts asked that he wanted his family at least to be memorialized together, regardless of whether they were murdered or whether they escaped.
Und das macht auch Sinn, weil auch sie, die fliehen konnten, waren auch Opfer.
Because those who fled were also victims.
Und insofern machen wir das in Arnstadt so, dass wir über den Ermordeten als auch den Menschen, die fliehen konnten, Stolpersteine verlegen und ihnen gedenken. Und auch hier sind ja, wenn auch wenige sind ja dabei, Lieselotte zum Beispiel hat überlebt, kurz ehrlich.
Survived, could survive. So you can see,
Genau,
it says right here,
genau.
survive, Auschwitz. You know, so the whole complexity of the experience is represented.
In diesem Haus hat Familie Ehrlich gelebt.
That's the house of Ehrlich, the family Ehrlich at the Thomas-Mann-Straße.
15, genau, und haben dort im Hinterhof eine Firma betrieben für Holzdrechsel.
And in the courtyard behind was their little factory for lathe work.
Ja. Nochmal zu dem Haus. Das Haus ist insofern für Arnstadt auch wichtig, weil es eins der Ghettohäuser ist.
So this is important for Arnstadt because it was one of the so-called ghetto houses, ghetto buildings.
Ich weigere mich, das Nazi-Wort zu nehmen. Die haben das
It's
als
difficult to say this word because it's a Nazi word in this context.
Nazi-Wort ist Judenhaus.
The so-called
Für mich
Jew
Ghettohaus.
house, quotation marks.
Das heißt, in diese Häuser mussten ab 1940 andere jüdische Familien, die in arischen Wohnungen lebten, mit einziehen bis zu ihrer
So
Deportation.
beginning in 1940, Jewish families from Arnstadt were forced to come and all live in the same building. And their other houses were appropriated, so-called Aryanized.
Und erinnert euch an den Blick, 100 Meter, 150 Meter von diesem Haus entfernt ist der Bahnhof.
And this is only 100 yards from the train station, you all will remember.
Ja. Bertha.
There's Tante Bertha. So this is who Ken goes to for vacation in 1934, 5, 6. We have postcards.
You're sure about that?
I'm pretty sure about that.
Because there was a Bertha who also was a cleaning person.
But in
Very
Arnstadt,
No.
yeah, so this is, he runs from Arnstadt, that he's he's at the grandparents. And also, and so Ken says, Hans says, I did this with Opa today, I did that with Opa today. And then at the bottom, Berta would write, everything's going great, Tony. We're having
Bertha
fun.
was, I'm just curious, because I know that he always spoke of Bertha, and Tony spoke of Bertha as this beloved person who was.
Would she
not
have
Jewish.
gone with him?
I
to
wondered,
Arnstadt? Yeah, I don't.
because they continue to write to her. And
For a long time.
it was important to Tony, that relationship.
Well, so it might be that that's the au pair cleaning lady and not Tante Ehrlich. Yeah.
I mean, there was a Schloss cousin.
There's the Schlosses,
So
yeah.
that's my father, and it was a Schloss relative in South Africa.
Yeah.
Genau, das ist auch eine Verwandtschaft, genau. Genau, dann nochmal eine ganz andere Linie, nämlich die Familie Schloss, die dann plötzlich kommt.
There's another line with the Schlosses.
Genau. Max Ehrlich, also nicht, wie ich gesagt habe, 1919, sondern 1914 schon verstorben.
So he dies in natural causes before World War I, 1914.
Und das Bild ist im Original bei Stefan in Buenos Aires.
And Stefan Goldschmidt in Buenos Aires has the original photo of his Uroma.
Yeah.
And that's his great grandmother, Bertha Ehrlich.
Ja.
Theresienstadt, Matt.
Vor 3 Jahren? 2019. 2019 waren wir gemeinsam auf einer Bildungsreise in Prag, Lidice und Theresienstadt.
So they, Berit and Jörg went on a educational study trip to Prague and Lidice and Theresienstadt 3 years ago.
Und in Theresienstadt haben wir dort die Zeit genutzt, den Arnstädtern, die nach Theresienstadt deportiert wurden, quasi ihre letzten Punkte zu finden,
So
wo
they
sie waren.
traced the spaces where the Arnstadt people had been in Theresienstadt. And this is exactly what the scholar Charles Worthy that we read calls the topography of genocide at this level. There's an important scholar who calls it topography des Völkermordes.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what he does. Yeah.
Diese Karte ist aus diesem Standardwerk von Arthur.
Yeah.
Dieses
So this is the standard scholar map. Yeah.
Genau. Diese gelben Punkte, die Sie sehen, dort könnten wir nachweisen, wo die Arnstädter wohnen, stimmt nicht, einquartiert waren und dort hausen mussten.
So this is
Oder
where
gestorben.
they saw the various places where the people from Arnstadt were housed, who couldn't say lived there, where they were forced to reside, it says.
Dieser gelbe Fleck, den werden Sie gleich wiedersehen, dort ist Bertha gestorben.
And that spot there in the corner, you'll see in a second, is where is Beata's place.
Was vielleicht noch wichtig ist zu sagen, dass es in Theresienstadt eigentlich keine Straßennamen gegeben hat, sondern es gab Q- und L-Straßen. Das heißt Längsstraßen und Querstraßen.
So the streets in Theresienstadt don't have street names, they just have a quadratic naming structure. Which is strange because in Mannheim, there's also a structure of streets in Mannheim. Quadratenstadt.
Ja.
And
Echt?
A7.
Oh, das wusste
Ja.
ich nicht. Oh,
And they're from the same time. Theresienstadt is a garrison town from the Austro-Hungarian Empire from 1720,
ja, ja, ja.
30, 4 später.
Ja.
Keine Ahnung. So you can see the Baroque fortification structure, and Theresienstadt also wasn't destroyed. All those buildings are still there.
Dieser gelbe Fleck, den ich Ihnen gerade unten zeigte,
And that's the spot there.
mein Wiesenbereich. Das ist ein Foto von Theresienstadt, also dort. Ist er da gestorben?
Mhm.
Was hier deutlich ist, das genau sind die Bahnschienen, auf denen die Menschen nach Theresienstadt hereingekommen sind.
So that's where the train lines to Theresienstadt enter.
Normalerweise, so sagte uns ein Historiker, sind die Schienen bis ungefähr hier gegangen. Die wurden also zurückgebaut. Also die Menschen sind bis hierher gekommen, mussten aussteigen und sich in diesem Haus wurden sie registriert.
And that's the
Also
first
jeder,
place.
der nach Theresienstadt gekommen ist, wurde dort registriert.
That's why we have such good records of Theresienstadt is with the registration building there.
Und also nur wenige Meter daneben in diesem, ich glaube, man nennt das Kasematten. Ja, in diesem Kasematten ist dann der Fall.
And there was a place of murder right there.
About the same time, taken from Arnstadt to Regensburg. Wurden Sie zur selben Zeit ungefähr von
Ja.
Arnstadt zu Regensburg?
Ja,
Yeah,
ja,
so,
ja.
One,
ja, ja.
one big deportation
Ja.
to Theresienstadt
Ja.
from Arnstadt,
Ja.
42.
1942.
Yeah.
Am 19., also diese ganz große Deportation aus Thüringen zumindest, über Sachsen ging die auch, da müsste man nachschauen, ob da Halle da mit dabei war, ging am 19. September 1942 von Thüringen zumindest aus nach Theresienstadt. Es kann sein, dass
So
Ja,
the first big deportation from the southwest, from Baden-Württemberg, is fall 1940. And then fall 1942 are deportations from central Germany, always to the east. And Theresienstadt in this case. Yeah.
warum,
This is a death certificate from Theresienstadt.
genau, nicht jeder Häftling, der in Theresienstadt interniert war, hat eine solche Todesfallanzeige, nicht jeder. Aber die ich finden konnte, die meisten Arnstädter, dort sagt das etwas aus, nämlich dort steht dann, wo sie geboren
So
sind.
not everybody deported from Arnstadt has this document. Been able to find this document of the death certificate, and the details are interesting.
Wo sie zuletzt gewohnt haben, in Arnstadt in dem Fall.
Uh-huh.
Und dann hier diese Jägerkaserne, also das, was ich gerade zeigte, da. Und früher hat sie in Q 608 gewohnt.
So important here is for historians is that you can see the address in Arnstadt where they came from. And
Das
that's
ist
a
dann
specific
tatsächlich
building in Theresienstadt.
Theresienstadt. Was also bedeutet, Q heißt Querstraße, das 6. Haus, in der 6. Querstraße im 8. Haus. Deshalb kann man es genau dort sagen.
Historians find this sort of detail work interesting because you can know from this who was in the same building in Theresienstadt. And Theresienstadt had a series of survivors. Auschwitz and Theresienstadt have more survivors than other camps for all kinds of complicated reasons. And knowing who was in which place at the same time is of interest to historians.
Überlebende, die fliehen konnten, Irma und Kurt Ehrlich, konnten mit ihrer, ich glaube, 4-jährigen Tochter noch fliehen, sind weggekommen. Luzi Ehrlich, einige Nachfahren, mit denen ich gesprochen habe, auch Stefan und wir kommen gleich noch zu einer anderen Frau, die immer sagten, Luzi Ehrlich, verheiratete Gutsmann, war die gute Seele der Familie, die sich
People and the story that Lucy was the beautiful soul of the family.
Noch ganz kurz die Geschichte Stefan Arnstadt, also Stefan Goldschmidt
So now the
Arnstadt.
story of Stefan Goldschmidt Ehrlich from Arnstadt.
Jetzt gehe ich mal vor. Wir gehen gleich nochmal zurück, aber weil ich jetzt einmal dort bin,
Ja,
also Stefans Verbindung mit Liechtenstein und mit Arnstadt. Bella Ehrlich heiratete Hugo Goldschmidt.
So one of the Ehrlich is married a Goldschmidt. Bella Goldschmidt Ehrlich Goldschmidt.
Und beide sind innerhalb von wenigen Monaten 1929 gestorben. Ich habe den Friedhof besucht und bin mit meinem Blumenstrauß über den Zaun geklettert.
I had to climb over the fence in order to get this one. Ist das blau? Wo ist das?
Das ist Lichtenfeld.
Das ist Lichtenfeld. So that's the Jewish cemetery in Lichtenfeld.
Ja.
Okay.
Also die beiden hatten 3 Söhne.
They had
Drei
3 sons.
Söhne. Und diese 3 Söhne wurden dann nach dem Tod ihrer Eltern zu verschiedenen
And
Verwandten
the
gegeben.
sons, when their parents died, were sent to relatives, different relatives.
Und Stephans Vater, Ludwig, der hat geschrieben Luther, so war sein Spitzname, ist nach Arnstadt gekommen, zur Familie Ehrlich.
So the Stefan Goldschmidt's dad, Ludwig, was sent to the Ehrlich family. So the mom's relatives in Arnstadt and grew up there.
Hat in Arnstadt gelebt, einige Zeit und ist dann, ich glaube Anfang Mitte, ich weiß es nicht genau, der 1930er Jahre dann nach, ich glaube, Bamberg gegangen, Stefan, jetzt müsste es mal antworten können, und konnte dann nach Argentinien dann fliehen. Und das ist diese.
Was able to immigrate to Argentina in the 1930s.
Ich vermute, dass ihr ganz in der Nähe des Hauses wart, in der Bahnhofstraße. Das ist also in Lichtenfeld der Bahnhof geradeaus.
So this is just across the way from the station in Lichtenfeld. Sure, we walk past this.
So, nochmal zurück. Hoch. Ja, genau. Luzi und ihr Schwager, ja, glaube ich, hier in Miami fotografiert. Wo Irma und Kurt, ich glaube, die haben dann in Detroit gelebt, soweit ich das.
Irma and Kurt lived in Detroit. Here's a photo of the other folks in Miami.
Und Luzi ist dann aber irgendwann dann auch nach Detroit gezogen.
And Lucy then came to Detroit.
Ein weiteres Kind von Bertha und von Max, Leo Ehrlich, mit seinen beiden Töchtern Hertha und Erika.
So one of the other 3 boys, Leo, with his 2 daughters.
Und seiner Ehefrau Lieschen.
Lieschen, his wife.
Die sind von Arnstadt, Moment, die Frau war aus Meiningen, genau. Und die sind dann von Arnstadt bzw. Meiningen nach Cuxhaven gezogen.
So they moved from Arnstadt and Meiningen, which was her hometown, to Cuxhaven
Und
in the north.
Und hat dort einen großen Vertrag gehabt mit der Fischereiindustrie. Also er hatte einen Obst- und Gemüsehandel.
So he did fruit and vegetable trade and then started with fish processing.
Ja, genau. Und etliche deutsche, arische Händler, denen hat das nicht gefallen. Sie wollten in das Geschäft rein.
And some of the local Germans didn't like that and they wanted to take away his business.
Man hat, bitte?
Wann?
1942, schon im Frühjahr.
42.
Schon ganz bald. Nee, Quatsch, noch viel früher. Das war im Frühjahr 1938, also noch vor der Pogromnacht. Weil Leo Ehrlich ist verhaftet worden, kam nach Hamburg, nach große Hamburger Gefängnis. Fuhlsbüttel, danke, genau. Kam nach Fuhlsbüttel, von Fuhlsbüttel nach Sachsenhausen. Er war ungefähr 1,5 Jahre in Sachsenhausen, von Sachsenhausen nach Dachau. Dort war er auch einige Zeit, dann kam er nach Buchenwald. Also man könnte meinen, fast zu Hause.
He's describing Hamburg concentration camp prison, then to Sachsenhausen, and then to Buchenwald, which is back where his hometown, near his hometown.
Ja. Buchenwald hatte keine Gaskammer, aber es gab in der Nähe gelegen eine sogenannte T4-Einrichtung, also eine Euthanasie-Einrichtung in Bernburg.
So Leo, Buchenwald did not have gas chambers. The whole story of that is very complicated. But one of the original T4 sites, that is hospitals that were used as murder centers, was nearby.
Ja. Weil Leo ja schon diese ganze Zeit an Lagern schon überstanden hat, war der, denke ich, gesundheitlich und körperlich völlig kaputt.
Years of being in the concentration camps.
Und am 2. Februar 1942 schreibt Buchenwald an die, das hieß auch wirklich so, an die Heil- und Pflegeanstalt Bernburg. Kannst du das lesen? Oder soll ich?
Nee.
Die auf jeden Fall überstellen die Häftlinge, nicht mehr arbeitsfähige Häftlinge, jüdische Häftlinge nach Bernburg.
So those prisoners no longer able to work, we are transferring to Bernburg to this murder site.
Genau.
This is this Nazi document.
Genau. Und rechts bei dem Strich, da ist dann Leo mit dabei.
Leo on that, murder list.
Und ja, das ist
So, yeah, the things, the associations with these T4 sites, these state hospitals, were all considered secret. That's what's found out. So
Bernburg.
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 So the name T4, but the
Tiergartenstraße
they had
4.
the gas come up.
Die Tiergartenstraße,
Yeah, so Buchenwald did not want to carry out these murders. They wanted them to be secret at Bernburg, where they also had a crematorium. Also they could dispose of the bodies.
Die Gaskammer gibt es dort noch heute.
And you can still go there.
Keine Gaskammer.
Yeah. There's a whole, we don't need to get into that. but there's-
Buchenwald hat keine Gaskammer.
Yeah.
Buchenwald nicht.
Uh-huh.
Und nur wenige Tage später schreibt dann die Landesheil- und Pflegeanstalt Bernburg, dort oben steht es.
So this is just the paint, what makes this so perverse is that Bernburg is this place of official sanctioned murder. Earliest state-sponsored murders are at these hospitals, and it's called the clinic, a clinic for a health clinic.
Ja.
And these places were the 4 main ones.
Also nur wenige Tage später schreibt dann die Klinik an Buchenwald, kommt die Liste zurück, dass die Häftlinge, die dorthin überstellt wurden.
So they, and so these are psychiatric clinics, right? So a psychiatric clinic becomes the earliest places of state-sanctioned, legal state-sanctioned murder in the so-called T4 action named for the office in the Tiergartenstraße number 4 in Berlin, just around the corner where there's a memorial now. And those murders start immediately in 1939 after the start of the war.
Und hier also bei der Antwort aus Bernburg nach Buchenwald, dass sie ihr Werk getan haben, ist ihre Abwicklung hier.
And the abbreviation died.
Yeah.
And so those people were murdered with gas. And I don't know at Bernburg at that time, but likely that was carbon monoxide from a truck. They would park the truck and run carbon monoxide into a sealed room and then put people straight to the crematorium there.
Bei meinen Recherchen habe ich den Grabstein gefunden von Leo Ehrlich, glaubte ich.
And this is a gravestone.
Und zwar in Hamburg-Ohlsdorf,
In Hamburg,
auf dem jüdischen Friedhof
in
Ohlsdorf.
the Jewish cemetery in Hamburg.
Und als ich mit einer Historikerin gesprochen habe, sagte die Frau zu mir, Herr Klaps, Sie glauben bitte nicht, dass da wirklich seine Asche drin ist.
But of course, Kakap says the person there, nobody should believe that his ashes are actually there. So it's a memorial stone.
Ja, nein, als Grabstein. Dort ist Asche beigesetzt worden. Ja, wirklich.
Ja, aber nicht aus Bernburg.
Nicht aus Bernburg, sondern aus Buchenwald. Es gab eine Anordnung in Buchenwald, wie viel Gramm Asche, also
Yeah, so
irgendeine
this is
Asche.
another example of the cynicism of the Nazi state is that to the family members, they would send ashes, any old ashes.
Also es gab eine Anordnung, wie viel Gramm Asche ein Kind, ein Erwachsener,
Child would
ein
have this
Kreis.
many ashes and a grown-up would have this many ashes, and those were dispersed back in this facade of a death process that was actually covering up. This is happening in 1940, in 42.
Ja, und diesen Familien, also man hat denen noch die Urnen geschickt und hat die sich auch bezahlen lassen. Die haben die, glaube ich,
And of course, you send the urn with the ashes from somebody to the family, and they were charged for the urn. They had to pay the bills. Das ist so, ja. Wir werden langsam müde.
wir gehen hier drüber. Geht schnell. Die Tochter von Leo Ehrlich, also die eine Tochter, die Mutter,
One of Leo Ehrlich's daughters.
Links Hertha und Lieschen sind in Auschwitz ermordet worden und Erika hat als einziges Familienmitglied überlebt.
In Auschwitz, she's the sole survivor of Leo and Lieschen's family.
Erika Newman ist die jüngste Tochter.
And she's the daughter.
Und eine Nachfahrin von einer anderen Familie, anderen jüdischen Familie aus Arnstadt, schrieb mir irgendwann, Jörg, ich bin jetzt in Miami bei meinem Sohn zu Besuch und ich habe Alicia Secchi gebeten, in einem Altersheim anzurufen, um Erika zum Geburtstag zu gratulieren.
So another Arnstadt relative calls and says that I've made contact with Erica, the daughter of Leo and Lieschen in Miami, in a retirement home.
Und noch am gleichen Abend hat mir dann Alicia dann geschrieben, Jörg, ich habe mein ganzes Leben darunter gelitten, dass man mir meine beiden Großmütter ermordet hat. Und heute habe ich eine Großmutter gefunden.
And Alicia says, Jörg, I've suffered my whole life because they killed both of my grandmothers, and today I got a new grandmother.
Das lassen wir weg. Alfred Ehrlich, ganz kurz, wegen Familien, Urlaub und Kinder. Alle Kinder der Familie Ehrlich haben total gerne Ferien in Breslau gemacht. Warum? Weil ihr Onkel Alfred Ehrlich in Breslau ein Schokoladengeschäft hatte.
So all the Alfred kids all love to go to Breslau to the uncle because he ran a chocolate factory. Breslau in Poland now.
Nun kann ich wahrscheinlich die Geschichte weitererzählen, weil wir dürfen heute bei Ihnen sein. Ich habe das so genannt, wenn ich den Schülern darüber spreche, die Geschichte geht weiter. Es ist eben nicht.
So the story goes on, he says, but now it goes on lots more than he thought when he wrote that. That's here you all are. So,
Donald Strauss hatte sich mit meinem langen Familienstammbaum auf den Weg gemacht und hat seine Verwandten besucht.
and Donald Strauss started tracking down people based on the family trees that you're.
Bei euch in Chile bei Familie Weinstein, in Buenos Aires bei Familie Goldschmidt.
The Goldschmidts and the Strausses.
Nochmal zurück?
Ja, bei Klinikum Weinstein.
Ja, genau. Also hier sitzen die beiden. Ich glaube, das ist Peter und das dürfte Claudio sein. Umgekehrt? Okay.
We have good high resolution photos of that. We'll put them all in the page.
Peter will now have the heart operation next month.
Weiter?
Ja.
Das Bild bedeutet mir sehr, sehr viel. Weil Donald Strauss macht sich mit meinem Familienstammbaum auf den Weg und besucht Stefan Goldschmidt in Buenos Aires. Der Sohn Ari von Stefan Goldschmidt, sein Enkel, also der Sohn von ihm, Und ich darf dabei sein, ich gucke in Arnstadt in das Handy und gucke in Buenos Aires raus.
So there's Jörg in the Zoom, in the video call, with people that have come together because of his work on the family tree. And more Arnstadt visits.
Dr. David Jonas aus New York, von dem ich erzählt habe, war 2011 da, am Grabstein von Hermann Aaron Ehrlich.
At the grave.
Eduardo, oh, nicht 2015, 2012 war die Stolpersteinverlegung.
Ja.
Eduardo. Und Familie Appel war jetzt, glaube ich, 2017 waren die da.
So these are all people who come to Arnstadt because of your work.
Geschafft, fertig. Entschuldigung, dass so lange gedauert hat.
Okay.
Ganz vielen Dank für all Ihre Bemühungen. Einsatz.
Das ist kein Dank nötig. Das ist wichtig, das zu tun. Das ist wichtig.
Nee, das macht aber nicht jeder.
Ja.
Something that not everybody does.
So what do you think? You want to take a break and go find some food? There's lots of food. Charlotte, vielleicht kannst du mal sagen, wo man am besten samstags unkompliziert was holt oder?
I think the easiest way to do is a Indian restaurant, which is called Ambush. And it's, I mean, it's like it's decent and not that expensive, and you always have a place and good food. I think that's the easiest way, also the closest one, and otherwise, I'm not sure what's open on Saturdays, to be honest. But there are like a few more restaurants in the area, like Deeds and Davis is those, I think.
So out the front and to the left?
So if you go to you go outside and then you have to go to the left.
To the left is an Indian place around the corner. And then for getting back in, what do you all think? Do you want to reconvene in 2 hours at 3 o'clock? Or just talk? And to hear Thomas and I are going to meet together now over lunch. But I think everybody come back at lunch and 2 hours is enough.
Can we be here in the meantime or just with you two?
You can be here, but you need me to get in and out of the door. Or Charlotte, bleibst du da? Yeah. So somebody will be back here at, I mean, I can stand at the door for a little bit, yeah. But we'll plan to have the door open at 3 to come back. And then then I'm very curious to hear what Thomas has to say as someone who specializes in this kind of intersectional work. Yeah.
Darf ich noch einen dranhängen, falls Sie irgendwelche Fragen haben oder genauere Daten, bin ich gern bereit, das Ihnen zu teilen. Klar.
So afterwards we can also.
We have lots of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of questions.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe stay here. I don't know if you're gonna starve or go run and get some food and come back quick. Oh, there's plenty of time. Yeah.
Should be so convenient to take to free for like.
Hour and a half?
That's better.
Hour and a half is better. I'll see you all at the door at 2:30.
I think it's
2:30.
feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unsere Rucksäcke können wir hier lassen?
Yeah, alles kann man hier lassen.
Danke.
You all can leave your things here. This is a safe room. I'm gonna turn the camera on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, thanks. Yeah, I think
I'll turn the stream back on at 2:30 Berlin time.
Hopefully, hi.